Welcome. This is the afternoon session when we're going to read the closed session items. First meeting of 2023. We'll be reconvening later on in the evening for our official city council meeting. But Clerk Abajan, let's have roll call.
Yes, council members Asatirian,
Here.
Brotman,
Here.
Divine, Najarian, Mayor Kasakian.
Here. And our colleagues who are not here on the dais are actually away at a conference, which is why they will not be with us in closed session and will not be joining us this evening. So it's just us three amigos up here. Can you please read the items into the closed session?
Yes, item A, conference with legal counsel pending litigation FE&M Inc. Employees Defined Contribution Plan Trust dated July 10, 1984 versus City of Glendale et al., LASC case number BS 16989. B, conference with legal counsel pending litigation Smith versus City of Glendale, LASC number 20ST CV20181. C, conference with legal counsel pending litigation Abrahamian versus City of Glendale, LASC case number BC708092. D, public employment attorneys, E, public employment chief of police.
All right. Do we anticipate reporting out on any of these items?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And items 1B, D as in David, and E, we anticipate reporting out.
All right. With that, we will recess to closed session. Thank you. And welcome to the first meeting of 2023 here, January 10th. Let's have roll call, please.
Council members Asatirian,
Here.
Brotman,
Here.
Divine, Najarian, Mayor Kasakian.
Here. Thank you. And as we mentioned, we have two of our council members absent today from this evening's meeting. They are away on city business. So we will conduct this evening's meeting with myself and council members Asatryan and Brotman. Please rise and join me in the flag salute and remain standing for the invocation delivered by City Clerk Abajan. Place your right hand over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing.
Let's begin by acknowledging that we are standing on the indigenous lands of the Gabrielino Tongva people. May the new year bring to you good health, love, and prosperity. May it bring to your family joy and abundant blessings. May it bring to our community light and connection. And may it bring to the world peace, justice, and healing. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Be seated. Clerk Abajan, may we have your report, please?
The agenda for the January 10th, 2023 regular meeting of the Glendale City Council was posted on Wednesday, January 4th, 2023 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Great. Thank you. And may we have the next item?
Next item is presentations and appointments by John Tahtalian, Assistant City Manager. It's agenda preview for the meetings of Tuesday, January 17th, 2023.
Mr. Takhtalian.
Good evening, Mayor Kasakian, members of the City Council. We do not have a regular agenda next week. What we have instead is a City Council in Your Neighborhood program. Council members will be at Griffith Manor at 6 o'clock next week. Location is 1551 Flowers Street. And there'll be 5 items on that particular agenda, just for conversation's sake. The first is the Glendale Narrows Riverwalk and Community Services and Parks programs. Then we'll talk about the Garden Bridge project, followed by a residential horse manure collection program that recently got instituted. The 4th item is the Verdugo Wash project update, as well as a final item regarding the housing element. Following next week, our next regular meeting will be on January 24th here in City Council chambers.
Oh, great. So next week's meeting will not take place here. It will be a City Hall in Your Neighborhood Town Hall style meeting. One of the things that had been instituted by prior councils, and then we didn't have them for a while, but my goal, and I hope my colleagues' goals after I'm termed out as mayor, will be that we continue to meet with members of our community in their various neighborhoods to hear from you directly. So the first such meeting will be in the Rancho area of our city, and hopefully it's open to everyone, but we want to especially hear from those residents and stakeholders who are living in that area. With that, I also want to, first of all, wish everyone a Happy New Year, and thank you for coming. And we have quite a crowd here tonight because we have a couple of special announcements. Now, before we go on to the consent items, do you want to make the announcement for the appointment? Mr. Galanian?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I can. All right, good evening. Mayor Kasakian, member of City Council. Upon the conclusion of an extensive nationwide search and the comprehensive selection process, it is my pleasure to share with you my choice for the new police chief of the City of Glendale. Chief Manuel Cid has nearly 20 years of experience serving the community of Culver City, including the last 2.5 years as their police chief. Throughout his career with the Culver City Police Department, Chief Cid has worked on a vast array of assignments while moving up the ranks of a full-service police department, including police officer, detective, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, assistant chief, and ultimately chief of police. Chief Cid's law enforcement career includes extensive experience in the areas of patrol and enforcement operation, investigations, law enforcement administration, and professional standards. He also has gained experience in emergency management, especially serving as Culver City's Emergency Operations Director during the COVID-19 pandemic and the period of civil unrest in the region, during the summer of 2020. Chief Sid has also worked on multiple local, state, and federal task forces impacting public safety on a regional level. Chief Sid holds law enforcement executive leadership positions, including currently serving as an executive board member for the LA Impact Task Force, the LA County Police Chiefs Association, and the California Police Chiefs Association. Chief Sid holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science and a Master's degree in Public Administration and Organizational Leadership. In addition to his formal education, Chief Sid is a graduate of the Sherman Blog Supervisory Leadership Institute, the West Point Leadership Program, California's Post-Executive Development Course, and the FBI's National Academy. During his career, Chief Sid has received several law enforcement awards and honors, including the Sustained Superiority Award, the Distinguished Service Medal, and the Career Achievement Award. As a police chief and a law enforcement leader, Chief Sid brings a collaborative style of leading an organization, a proactive approach to community-centric policing, a steadfast commitment to professionalism, and a focus on fostering and preserving partnerships at regional and community levels. Chief Sid is a first-generation Cuban American and has spent most of his life living in the greater Los Angeles area. He's married to his wife of 14 years, Michelle, and they have two daughters, Alexa and Elisa, who are present here this evening, as well as his father, Manuel. With that, I respectfully request your confirmation of my appointment of Manuel Sid as your new police chief.
Thank you, Mr. Galanian. We will now entertain a motion from the dais. Councilmember Asadrian, she has the motion.
Go ahead.
I move that pursuant to the Glendale City Charter, the Council of the City of Glendale hereby approves the city manager's appointment of Manuel Sid as the Chief of Police of the City of Glendale, effective January 16, 2023.
And I'm happy to second that.
Thank you. May we have roll call, please?
Council members Asatryan,
Yes.
Brotman,
Yes.
Divine, Najarian, Mayor Kasakian.
Now, although my colleagues are not here, this was discussed in closed session. They both voted in the affirmative during the closed session, or agreed in the affirmative for the hiring of Manuel Sid to be the next chief of the City of Glendale. And with that, I am proud and will cast my vote as yes to approve him as the next chief. Please join us in welcoming with a warm Glendale round of applause to the podium the next chief of the City of Glendale. Chief Sid, the podium is yours.
Wow. Thank you. And good evening, Mayor, council members, City Manager Galanian, city staff, and all our community members joining us both in the chambers this evening as well as on TV. Incredibly humbled and honored to be joining you to accept this appointment as your next police chief. And thank you for the outpouring of support that's in this room today. It is beyond humbling and so reassuring. Let me begin by expressing my sincere gratitude and thanks to the entire City Council and to City Manager Galanian for your confidence and support. I'm honored by your appointment and excited to begin this new chapter in my professional and personal life. The Glendale Police Department is an organization I have respected and admired for many years, and to have the opportunity to serve as this department's next police chief is truly a dream come true for me. I consider this opportunity to serve the Glendale community to be a great privilege and responsibility, a privilege and responsibility that I don't take lightly, and one that I will attack and approach with a great deal of professionalism, passion, a tireless work ethic, and a great deal of humility, all to ensure that our city organization and this police department continue to provide the highest level of professional city services to this community while preserving the great quality of life our residents have come to expect. To the men and women of the police department, many of which are joining us here this evening, both sworn and professional staff, I am so excited and humbled to get this opportunity to work alongside all of you. The Glendale PD is truly one of the premier law enforcement organizations in this region, and it is a direct reflection of the talented men and women, many of which are standing behind me, at this organization that work tirelessly and passionately at this police department. Please know that you have my commitment to work alongside all of you to ensure that Glendale PD remains a highly proactive and professional organization, one that maintains a sharp focus on providing a high quality of police services to all the members of this community and ensures that the city of Glendale remains one of the safest cities in America. I'd like to briefly acknowledge and thank Captain Andrew Jenks, who's been serving as the department's acting police chief over the last few months, as well as the entire command staff at the police department, all of whom have done a terrific job during this leadership transition and have been of great value to me. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much the way you welcomed me. I can't thank you enough. I'd also like to briefly acknowledge and thank former Police Chief Carl Povolitis. Gave over 30 years of service to this organization and this community and to this profession. I'm really humbled to be able to succeed him. Thank you, Chief, for his many years of service. To our residents, businesses, visitors, and community stakeholders, all that make up this diverse and thriving Glendale community, I am incredibly excited to get to know you, to become a part of this community, to get to learn and understand the many cultures that make up this organization, this city, if you will, and to work together in collaboration with all of them to ensure that this continues to be a great place to live, work, and visit. Finally, I'd like to thank my family, particularly my wife, Michelle, and our two daughters, Alexa and Alyssa, along with my father, who are all joining me here this evening. Without their love and support, I certainly would not have been able to commit myself to my profession in the manner I have over the last nearly 20 years. And I'm incredibly thankful for their ongoing support. I'm blessed to have them supporting me in this new adventure and in this new commitment. Thank you, and I love all of you. Mayor and council members, again, thank you so much for giving me a few minutes to speak this evening. And thank you for the confidence and support you've shown in me in this appointment. In collaboration with all of these folks, I assure you we won't let you down. Thank you.
Thank you. You can go ahead and take a seat. We do have a request to speak on this item, and it's from a representative from the Glendale Police Officers Association. If we'll ask them to please approach the podium. Welcome, and please state your name for the record.
Thanks, sir. Good evening, Mayor Kasakian, council members. Thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time. I am obviously not as good of a speaker as Chief over here, but please bear with me. My name is Chris Krivak. I'm a sergeant for the Glendale Police Department, currently assigned as a supervisor for the Robbery Homicide Unit. I am also president of the Glendale Police Officers Association. The Glendale Police Officers Association is honored to represent the bravest and brightest men and women in law enforcement. On behalf of every member of the Glendale Police Officers Association, we would like to formally congratulate Chief Sid as our new chief and welcome him to the Glendale Police Department family. For over 100 years, the Glendale Police Department has provided exceptional public safety services to everyone that lives, visits, and enjoys the city of Glendale. The exceptional police services provided by our past and current Glendale Police family has led the city of Glendale to be consistently ranked in the top 10 safest cities in the nation year in and year out. We realize that consistently being ranked as one of the safest cities in the nation is due in large part to the commitment, pride, and service every employee of the Glendale Police Department provides daily, but know that we could not do this without the overwhelming support we receive from our elected officials and the citizens we serve. The citizens of Glendale and our elected officials have remained steadfast in their support for the Glendale Police Department, and on behalf of our members, we thank you for that unwavering support. Chief Sid has a well-established and excellent reputation throughout the law enforcement community, and the Glendale Police Officers Association is excited to have him lead our department into the future. We currently have a dedicated, united, and capable command staff that continually steps up for the betterment of our citizens, organization, and employees. We welcome Chief Sid to the rank of police chief and look forward to his leadership and guidance for years to come. Chief Sid, you are walking into a world-class police department that provides professional law enforcement services to its community. We, the people of this great agency, look forward to working with you and make the Glendale Police Department even better. With collaboration from all the stakeholders at the Glendale Police Department and your leadership, I believe our department can rise to the next level, and we look forward to accomplishing this endeavor with you. Again, on behalf of the men and women of the Glendale Police Department, congratulations, Chief Sid, and welcome to the Glendale Police Department family. Thank you guys very much.
Okay. There was a card from the audience that was submitted. Well, in the spirit of democracy and those principles, which we all take oaths to defend, we'll take the card from the member of the audience from our public. Mike Mohill, you'll have 3 minutes. And we won't be taking any more cards because anyone who wished to speak on this could have submitted a card by now. But go ahead.
Good evening, council members. My name is Mike Mohill. Glendale has always had a great police department. I've known all the police chiefs in the past, anywhere from, well, I can't remember their names, I'm sorry. But one thing that bothers me when we praise our police department, what makes a city safe? Is it the personnel in our police department and our fire department? Is our elected officials that make our city safe? What makes our city safe than other cities in this county? I'll tell you what it is. It's the people, the men, women, and children who live in the city of Glendale. It's their values that keep our city safe. Our crime is low compared to other cities. Why? Because of the people who live in this residence, in this location. It didn't just happen. You know, we've had a history of being 70 years ago of being a racist town. But guess what? We've changed in those 70 years. Glendale is a safe place to live and raise families because we have people who live here who care. And that's why people come to Glendale and they pay lots of money for rent and to buy a home because Glendale is a safe place. Again, I'd like to thank our police department. They've always been here for us. And same thing with our fire department. So let's also thank, again, let's thank ourselves that we make Glendale a safe place to live and work. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me ask my colleagues, I'm sure, who would like to say a few words of congratulations to Mr. Sid before we allow you to go and celebrate with your family this evening. Councilmember Brotman.
Okay. Well, Chief Sid, it's great to have you. I think we've met twice. Is that right? Yeah, and I don't know if people know how we go through these selection processes, but it's a very long and extensive process. I think it probably started 6 months ago. We have multiple panels that review the candidates. I think we had 3 in this case, 3 separate panels. They rank their top 3. All 3 panels have to, you have to pass all 3 panels in order to even get to the city manager. In this case, let me step back. Sometimes we have a problem. You know, we have one panel that likes one person, another panel that likes another person. It's hard to kind of line it up. This time, all 3 panels put the candidates in the exact same order, and they had the chief number 1. All 3 panels. That's pretty rare. So that really tells us something about the chief. And it's even more important because, or it's more remarkable because we had 3 really strong candidates that rose to the top, and the 3 went to our city managers to select. That's the way it works. And the city manager selects one of the 3, brings that candidate to us, we interview him or her, and then we ratify or not. However the case may be. But I kind of want to tell that story because I think it is really remarkable. We had a great response when we went out looking for people. We had top quality candidates, and we had someone who rose to the top in all the 3 panels. And so we're just super excited to have you and look forward to getting to know you better.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Alsatrian.
Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome, Chief. I, too, am very excited for this new chapter for our city. I do have to disagree that, you know, the Glendale Police Department wasn't always the best department. I remember a Glendale that I grew up in that had serious issues within the police department. We are not that department anymore, and we're not that city anymore. I think we've come a long way from that period where we actually had to launch police complaint hotlines for the way our officers were treating our residents and the many internal issues that we had. And I hope that this new chapter that you're embarking on today builds on the improvements that we've made for the fine women and men that are serving in our department, as well as our residents that live here. Mr. Mohill, I think it's a combination of both our police department and the wonderful people that live and work in our city that make up the city. I'm speaking now. Thank you. And so, welcome. I look forward to working with you. And, you know, Chief Pavlidis was very much involved in our community events and activities and meeting with different organizations. And I hope that you will continue on that path and build on that as well. And welcome to your entire family. And I know that you serve as an example to your 2 daughters. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you, Councilmember Asadrian, and I want to echo the sentiments and many of the great things that were said about you in reading your bio and your accomplishments to introduce you to the residents of Glendale. Most importantly, I want to thank your family. Thank your family and apologize ahead of time for the long hours they'll be putting in, making sure that our city is safe. But we will make sure to do right by you and right by your family, giving you the resources that you need to lead a premier organization for one of the premier cities in California and in the country. As was mentioned, we are a safe city for all of the reasons mentioned, but truly it is the people that make the place, and we are an incredible place to live and work and raise a family. And, you know, most people will say they move to Glendale for the schools or the neighborhoods. No one says, oh, I'm moving to this city because they have a great police department or a great fire department. Some may, but not everyone. But these places like our city are great because of the people in the organization that make it so. I know that many of us have been watching the news, have been following what's happening in other cities in California during this storm, keeping those families in our minds and in our thoughts and prayers. And anytime there's a crisis, anytime there's an emergency, it's the men and women of the police department and the fire department that are the ones that run towards the crisis, not away from it. And so it takes a very special person to lead an organization like that. We are now fortunate to have completed our recruitments to have a phenomenal fire chief, Chief Ernst, now a phenomenal police chief who I'm sure is going to do an excellent job leading an excellent organization. And to quote Peter Parker's Uncle Ben, with great power comes great responsibility. One of my favorite quotes from Spider-Man. I know that you will take that quote to heart. And also, I want to congratulate your father for having raised such a fine individual to take on this responsibility for our city. There's a saying in Armenian about parents and children. We say, you recognize the tree by the fruit that it bears. And in English, we say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So congratulations, sir. Congratulations, Chief Sid, and good luck to you. Now go celebrate with your family. Take care. All right, what is the next item?
Next item is item 4, consent items, including minutes. The following are routine and may be acted upon by one motion. Any member of council or the audience requesting separate consideration may do so by making such request before motion is proposed.
All right, any requests to pull any of these items without seeing that? It's going to come to either you or you. So one of you is going to make a motion, the other is going to second it tonight. So
I'll move the consent calendar.
okay.
I'll second.
All right, with that, let us have roll call for the consent items.
Council members Asadrian,
Yes.
Brotman,
Yes.
Devine, Najarian, Mayor Kasakian.
Yes. Thank you. With that, the consent calendar is adopted. Let's move on to the next item, item 5 on the agenda.
Item 5 is city council and staff comments.
Okay. Okay, well, we'll just wait for, all right. A lot of excitement with the appointment of our new chief. He's already making fans. All right. Now, city council and staff comments. Let me turn to my colleagues, see who would like to go first. Councilmember Brotman and then Councilmember Alessandrian.
Well, happy New Year's to everyone. It's good to be back. I have two things I wanted to raise, and one of them I see Mr. Bulanikian in the back, who's our Director of Community Services and Parks, and I hoped he could just come and say a word to us and to the public about how our homeless population has fared during these incredible storms and what we're doing. And I know we have at least one coming up next weekend, and there's a lot of concern about the people that are on the street. So maybe you can just fill us in.
Good evening, Mayor Kasaki, members of the council. Councilmember Brahman, basically our unsheltered or unhoused homeless individuals. We have our outreach teams, Ascensia outreach team and our Glendale Police outreach team going out and offering services, providing services. And if any individual is interested in services, then we'll go ahead and assist them with either a temporary shelter as part of our hotel voucher program or Ascensia. Currently, our Ascensia 45-bed shelter is full at capacity, so we will refer them to our the winter shelter program, which is located in Pacoima. They have a 65-bed shelter for the night.
So as far as we know, we've been able to get everybody in.
No, we currently have
under a dry roof.
No, we currently have individuals that are out on the street.
And we are reaching out to them, I know.
We are reaching out to them. We have a number of individuals that are service resistant. That's a challenge that we currently face. And the service resistant individuals are approached by our outreach staff probably once or twice a week, convincing them to receive services. I do have Ms. Arsene San here, our homeless programs manager, if you have any further questions regarding our programs.
No specific ones unless my colleagues do, but it's been something, there's been a lot of discussion in the media, and I've been thinking about, when I'm warm at home through all this, what some people are facing. So I just wanted you to address that.
Councilmember Brahman, we are offering services to the individuals, and if they want it, we will find them temporary shelters such as our hotels. We have a number of hotels that we're working with, but it's the service-resistant individuals that are a challenge to work with.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if anybody else has any
Thank you.
questions.
And I know that there's a meeting going on tonight about our efforts to address it, and there's some subsequent meetings happening as well.
Mayor Kasakian, the meeting tonight has been postponed. Our January meetings are moved to February.
Okay,
That's part of our homeless action plan.
all right. So the homeless action plan, hopefully there's someone at the location directing folks. Because I know one person who was mistaken about the date and tried to come to the city yesterday and wasn't able to gain access because the meeting wasn't yesterday. Thank you. Any other issues? Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I also want to share a really good story of local leaders in our community working together with a very accessible legislator to solve a big statewide problem. It starts with a group of parents from Franklin Elementary, led by Monica Campagna, who's a regular visitor here, and Karen Nielsen. The two of them saw an issue with lunch foodware being used once and then thrown away. They worked with the Glendale Unified School District and the Hobart Company to pilot a dishwasher program so that kids can do what we all did, at least I did growing up, which is to use real trays, washable utensils, regular plates and cups. So they did this pilot, and the success of the pilot led them to approach Senator Portantino. And they asked him to carry a bill providing funding for a statewide program that would help schools put in dishwashers to kind of replicate this across the state, which he did. And while the bill itself didn't make it, I just learned today that the governor has agreed to set aside $15 million to fund this program. According to Monica, just based on some rough numbers using the costs at Franklin, this money will help as many as 375 schools shift to reusables, serving upwards of 225,000 students. So that's 225,000 students who will transition away from the use it once and toss it mentality that's dominated our school cafeterias since the 80s, and 225,000 kids who will see reuse as normalized, will bring that information home to their families and into their communities. So I think it's a really great win. Beyond the specifics of the issue, I love this because it shows what a handful of committed citizens can do working with a legislator who's willing to listen and is open to new ideas. So I want to thank Monica, Karen, all the other Franklin parents that were involved, thank the Unified School District for being willing to make some changes, which are not always easy, and to thank Senator Portantino for bringing the idea to Sacramento. Lastly, thank the governor for carving out the money to take this program statewide. I think it's just really exciting. So I wanted to share that, and that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Brotman. Councilmember Alsatian.
So I have one item that I would need a second on, and then I'd like to give a report after that. We've talked about this previously, but, I come from a family of immigrants. We have on the agenda today an item on waste management and recycling. I'd like to formalize a program in partnership with our school district where our Glendale Water and Power and our sustainability office is also working with our GUSD students to do an education piece, see what avenues there are for us to coordinate these efforts. Because I think as we're moving forward, educating the next generation is going to be the right way to ensure that the parents are educated on waste management and proper recycling and so forth. And so I would appreciate a report back of how we can make that happen. I guess I would need a second for that.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Asatian, we actually do have a program in place. It was put on hold because of the pandemic, and obviously students not going to schools, but we'll definitely resurrect it. And if you like, we can bring a report back to you as to the details of this program. Or Mr. Hardgrove's here, he may be familiar with that program and he can provide some details as what we've done in the past.
Does this include like the field trips to the recycling center and so forth that we talked about? Okay, all right. And then during the holidays, actually, I traveled to Armenia. I would love to say that it was a fun trip, but it was not. It was, as a matter of fact, a very heavy trip. I had the opportunity to visit our sister cities, Gyumri and Kapan. I wasn't able to visit our latest sister city, Martuni in Artsakh, because today marks the 30th day of the blockade. I'm happy to share that both Gyumri and Kapan want to reestablish strong ties with our city. There's a lot of opportunities for us to work together and collaborate. Just to share some points, Gyumri actually is really leading the way in clean energy projects. They've actually reached a point where all of their government and school facilities are all 100% clean energy. They're looking for ways to do better waste management. As it pertains to Kapan, for those that don't know, Kapan currently is in an area where there's military, Azeri military posts. Some parts of the region are actually now occupied by Azeris. And so it was very difficult to talk about things that you usually would talk about as a sister city partnership. We visited the Kapan Museum. There's a section in the museum that's dedicated to the Glendale and Kapan Sister City Association. I was excited to see our council photos and things from the past that were there. Gyumri is looking to open up a new museum that highlights all their sister cities, and they're hoping that we can also give them some things that they can include in the museum. And the mayor of Kapan wanted me to formally pass on an invitation for a delegation visit when we find it appropriate. And I obviously extended the same invitation for them to join us here. Just a fun fact for Mr. Calvert, I also visited the Yerevan City Council meeting as an honorary guest. One of the items they actually had on the agenda was the alfresco and how restaurants are encroaching on sidewalks. But sure enough, apparently the city currently has 26,000 permits for renovations and build out, and their process requires for them to have a 15-day turnaround. And if the application and permit isn't given within the 15 days, then individuals have the right to build whatever they want, which is an interesting. One of the last things that all of them asked for was for us to collaborate on emergency preparedness. They're looking for assistance for that, as emergency preparedness tends to be an issue all across Armenia and, of course, Artsakh. That's all I have.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you for representing Glendale well during your visits abroad. I don't have anything really to, I have one thing to really say about this evening. Of course, it's great to be back with everyone after the holiday break. Again, it was relatively uneventful, peaceful holiday. I hope that everyone was able to observe it and celebrate the holiday season, whatever you celebrated with your loved ones. There was a number of events last week in observance of the Armenian Orthodox Christmas, which is held on January 6th. There was a number, it's also the Epiphany, so there was a number of blessing of water ceremonies at Glendale Memorial Hospital and one at Glendale Adventist Hospital, it was an honor to represent the city at those events. Now, this coming Monday, actually, one thing I do want to ask, and not ask, but rather inform our residents, we have asked our staff to keep an eye on the structures at Rockhaven. I know that a few folks emailed me and my colleagues interested in the status of those buildings, and staff is looking into it and making sure that they're keeping an eye on any issues that may arise. We know that there are some leaks. We know that we're taking care of it. We're addressing them, and we're moving forward on that. So rest assured that we're concerned as well. I just want to let everyone know that Monday is a holiday. It's Martin Luther King Day. The city will be closed on Monday, and it is a very important day for many Americans. It should be an important day for all Americans, but because of the reminder of the struggles that so many have had to fight, the challenges, discrimination people in our country have had to endure until those rights that were outlined in our Constitution were accessible to all and applied to all. I've been greatly influenced by two of the people I admire the most are Mahatma Gandhi, who had tremendous influence on Martin Luther King, whose writings I think should be mandatory reading for every American, especially our young students in schools. And I recently reread his speech that he gave in Oslo during his acceptance of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, December 10, 1964. And this is just a brief passage, if you'll indulge me. I accept this award today with an abiding faith in America and an audacious faith in the future of mankind. I refuse to accept despair as a final response to the ambiguities of history. I refuse to accept the idea that the isness of man's present nature makes him morally incapable of reaching up for the eternal oughtness that forever confronts him. I refuse to accept the idea that man is mere flotsam and jetsam in the river of life, unable to influence the unfolding events which surround him. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. A very hopeful message, despite what Martin Luther King and many Black Americans have had to endure in this country. Less than 4 years, a little over 3 years from when he gave the speech in Oslo, which you can view online. You can see the film of it. The Reverend Martin Luther King, Dr. King, was assassinated. Certainly nowadays, as we are so removed from the turmoil of the civil rights era, we see still inhumanity unfolding in places like Ukraine, the unspoken and ignored tragedy in Artsakh, as Councilmember Asatryan stated, and the tragedy right here in our midst that we were just discussing with tens of thousands of people who are left homeless. All of this can erode one's faith, but this coming Monday, when most of us take pause from our work or from our daily routines, let us remember that the holiday that is officially marked is an opportunity for us to consider what we have if we have an abiding faith in America and an audacious faith in the future of mankind, as Reverend Martin Luther King said. I know that Todd Leonard is here, Pastor Leonard is here to announce, I'm sure you're here for the march. I was going to mention it if you had not come, but I will not take your thunder and I'll allow you to speak about this. But there is a March for Peace, and you'll be hearing more about that from Pastor Leonard. So I was going to give it a plug. And that's all I want to say. Again, thank you. Welcome back to these chambers, and we'll try to do the best we can for the city that we all love. Thank you very much. Okay. Do we have any staff comments?
No, Mr. Mayor, we don't.
All right. With that, what is the next item on the agenda?
The next item is community event announcements. We have 4 cards and 1 caller.
All right. Todd Leonard, podium is yours.
Mayor Kasakian and honorable members of the council and staff, and to the residents of Glendale, I would like to very much invite everyone in our fair city to join us for the Glendale Peace Walk and Festival, which is on Martin Luther King Day on Monday, January 16th from 10 to 2 o'clock. This is an event that is the 3rd event that we've had in the city, but the first one we've finally been able to have on the date that we always intended it to be. We have hoped, those of us who plan this event every year, that this will become a community tradition that will be cherished, that will invigorate our city to embrace the ideals of Dr. King, as Mayor Kasakian shared just a moment ago. Our city has a history that is not so bright, and yet we can celebrate how far our city has come over the years to become a city that is now much more equitable and just for all. And part of the purpose for our event is to celebrate all the progress that has been made in this city over the years. But it is a call to remind us that we still have work to do, that we still have people in our city who are more prone to challenges than others, and that we can continue that work together to make this even more just, more equitable. We can never say we're done with the work of justice and peace. We can just say we've done so much and we have more to do. So this event is to be a great time to bring families, for our students from GUSD, for members of all organizations in our community to come together and to celebrate and to rededicate ourselves. One note that we do need to make that needs to be changed from what is on the slide that you see before you is that because rain is forecast, pretty high likelihood of rain on Martin Luther King Day, rather than meeting and starting in the Civic Plaza as we had hoped, we are going to begin our meeting at First Baptist Church of Glendale. And that's at the corner of Wilson Avenue and Louise Street, just a couple blocks from City Hall. And we will gather there and have our rally together, our celebration through speech and music and spoken word. We are pleased to announce that we will also have our U.S. Representative Adam Schiff, who will be at that event and share a few words of his reflection on Dr. King for that day. And so please plan to come to the event, but please don't come to the Glendale Civic Center. Instead, come to First Baptist Church of Glendale. We'll be gathering at 10 o'clock and we'll kick off the program at 10:30. Thank you again.
All right. Thank you very much. Next is Tamara Movsesian. Ms. Movsesian, you will have 3 minutes. Երեք րոպե.
Հենց շատ լավ գործ է արել Հայաստանում, որ օպերայի եւ Լոս Անջելեսի թատրոնների համագործակցության պայմանագիր է սկսել, դա մի քիչ էլից համար ազնական է, որտեղ օպերայի շենքը սարքած է իմ պապիկիս տան եւ Հողամասի տեղը։ Դուք բոլորդ կարող եք նայեք նոր եւ հին Երևան հաղորդումը, որտեղ իմ բաբան պատմում է, ոնց իր պապան գրել է, ստորագրել է, տվել է տվել իր Հողամասը օպերայի շենքը սարքելու համար։ Ոչ մի կոպեկ փող չի վերցրել։ Բայց լավ կլիներ, որ գլեդել Ալեքս թատրոնի ու հայկական թատրոնի հետ էլ կազմես համագործակցություն, որտեղ գլեդելը վսոտքի բատ քաղաք չի։ Գլեդելի բնակիչները արժանի են Ալեքս թատրոն գնան, թատրոն դայել բանես։ Եղա, հիմա 3 բոթերի շենքի մասի դասեմ։ Արտաշես ամսի 3-ի երկրորդ անգամ եկել է այդ շենքը տեսել է, ինչ վիճակում է, ասեց ինքը մասնագետ չի, ես իրան հասկանում եմ, բայց Սիթիում կան մասնագետներ։ Ես ձեզ այսօր միայն մի դեպք ասեմ, որ դուք եթե մասնագետել չեք, պատկերացնեք։ Լադրի ռումը, որը 30 տարի առաջ սարքած, հաշվարկած է եղել 3 հատ լվացքի մեքենայի, 3 հատ չորանոցի համար, հիմա անցյալ շաբաթ դրել են 5 հատ լվացքի մեքենա, 2 անգամ ավելի մեծ քաց հիները, 5 հատ էլ չորանոց, էլ 2 անգամ ավելի մեծ քաց հիները։ Ինձ հետաքրքիր է, պատալոկը ու պոլը կպահեն այդ ծադրությունը, թե չէ։ Դա նման է իմ կարծիքով, եթե թոթրակը, որը հաշված է Սինան ավտո տանելու համար, բռնես թոթրակի վրա տանկ բարձես։ Կդիմանա թոթրակը։ Էլեմենտար լոգիկա է, մասնագետ լինել պետք չի։ Եվ պերմիտները վերջացել է, 2 պերմիտը այս տարվա, անցյալ տարվա վերջին, մեկն էլ այս ամսվա վերջանում։ Բայց ձեր արմոտ դահապետյանը երևում է բոլորիդ տերն է։ Հեռախոսի զանգերին ինքնա պատասխանում, փողը ինքնա վերցնում, պերմիտը ինքնա տալի, փողը ինքնա բաժանում, ինսպեկտորին ինքնա ուղարկում։ Ես չեմ հասկանում, արմոտը այս Սիթիի պետն է, ղեկավարն է, ով է արմոտը։ Բայց հետաքրքրվեք, տեսեք, ով է այդ մարդը։ Չի կարելի 100 հոգի ծեր մարդիկ մնալու են փլատակների տակ, գլեդելը սեսմիկ գոտու մեջ է։ Սենտրալի վրայի շենքերը քանդեցին, սաղ բժշկական օֆիսներ էին։ Հա, Արտաշեսին միք նայի, Ռուբիկ,
Դիգին
Լուսիկը թողել է ես իր
Դիգին Մովսեսյան,
խոսել։
նայում է, որտեղ ձեր ժամը
Հա,
լրացավ,
գիտեմ,
եւ ուզում ենք հարգենք միս բոլորին էլ որ
Լուսիկի տեղը կարող եմ խոսեմ։ Լուսիկի $500 դե միջև այսօր իր տատերը չէ տվել։ Պարկե
Գնեք,
տատելուց։
եթե Տիգին Ղազարյանի համար խոսելու պետք է Տիգին Ղազարյանը միանա ձեզի եւ եթե իր խոսքը ուղի։ Excuse me,
Ավելի լավ կլինի։ Դուք լավ մտածեք, Արտաշես։ Որ դու մասնակից չես, դա բան չի։
I understand, but we have rules.
Ատգավոր կա չի։ Եղավ։
Thank you, thank you, Ms. Mosesyan. Ms. Ghazarian, would you like to speak? Tigin Ghazarian, Kuzanak Khosel? The next speaker is Lisik Ghazarian. All right, Ms. Mosesyan was saying that she was trying to speak on behalf of Ms. Ghazarian. That's what our exchange was for, along with me reminding her of our chamber rules of 3 minutes is 3 minutes. Give or take, I guess, I don't know. Mr. Mohill, 3 minutes.
I'll try and keep it under 4, okay? Good evening, council members. My name is Mike Mohill. December 13 was the last council meeting for 2022. I asked Mayor Art Kasakian to address the finances of the Americana at Brand as he had promised before the November 7, 2022 election. The mayor responded that there was nothing nefarious about the Americana project and that the Glendale voters had approved the project. Mayor Kasakian, you know very well that the Americana is not making a dime. Glendale taxpayers are paying $3.6 million annually on the interest on the town center council, okay? The bond. Like former council member Reg Akajanian and Paula Devine, you don't have the courage to agendize the Americana finances for public discussion. Knowing how this council and staff works together, unless we have an independent forensic audit, not just a city staff report, public will receive nothing but a dog and pony report. Yes, without having an independent forensic audit of the Americana at Brand, the city staff will be just doing another exercise in futility. Between 1980 and 2004, the city spent $77 million to purchase the 15.5 acres of land needed to build the town center, later to be called the Americana at Brand. In 2004, by barely 50.2%, the voters of Glendale approved the proposed town center on the promise by City Manager Jim Starbird and our council members that the Americana was going to earn a minimum of $3.8 million annually. City of Glendale gave this prime land free and clear to Mr. Caruso so he could build his Americana dream. By the time the city gave this 15.5 acres of property, this prime real estate had grown to over $300 million in value. Today, the property is worth over $1 billion. Rather than leasing the Americana to Mr. Caruso, our naive and foolish council members gave the land to Mr. Caruso so he could obtain a bank loan to build his shopping center. Had Mr. Caruso leased the land from the city, then Glendale taxpayers would have retained ownership of the property if the town center had failed. I use the words naively and foolishly because at other shopping centers that Mr. Caruso owns, like the Grove in Los Angeles or the Commons in Calabasas, the taxpayer leased the land to Mr. Caruso for $1 per year for 99 years. A big difference in financing. Thank you.
All right, we have one person on the phones.
Yes, we have one person, Herbert Milano, on the phone. Herbert, you're on air. You have 3 minutes. Herbert, you're on air. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Kasakian, members of the City Council. My name is Herbert Milano. I would like to discuss and present to you an idea, and that is a review and a public study of the city's financial statements. oftentimes every year when you receive the annual comprehensive financial reports, it is simply noted and filed, but it's not really discussed at length. And yet, if you were to look at every business in the United States and every nonprofit organization, not only do they discuss an annual report, they discuss it monthly, in every monthly report. And yet, we don't seem to be doing that. And I'm concerned particularly about the state of our roads and infrastructure. And I would like to encourage the City Council to take up a study of this financial report, especially pages 66 and 67, where you're able to see the total capital assets and you can easily see the accumulated depreciation. And I would imagine that there are supporting documents that tell you what the actual deferred infrastructure is for the city. I have been speaking for many, many years concerning the deterioration of our streets, the lack of construction or reconstruction of our roads. And it so happened that last month as well, there was someone from Southern Glendale, I think the president of the Adams Hill Homeowners Association, also presented the same case. Our roads are deteriorating, and it's a blight on our city. And I think we deserve better. I think that we deserve for the city to discuss the capital improvements and make it part of your continual monthly evaluation. And that's my suggestion for this year, so that at least by the time you get to the budget study sessions, you have at least gone over some of the essential and key elements that are problematic with regard to our finances. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Seeing as there are no other cards or callers, and I think we had actually hit our limit for that portion, let's go to the next item on the agenda.
Next are action items. Action item A, management services regarding ordinance amending Glendale Municipal Code 1995 by replacing chapter 8.42 in its entirety pertaining to plastic waste reduction. One ordinance for introduction.
All right, Mr. Galanian.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, back in 2021, the City Council adopted two ordinances tackling the use and distribution of single-use plastics. And on November 29th of last year, this City Council directed staff to prepare an ordinance regulating plastic waste. And I'm going to invite David Jones, our Sustainability Officer, to share the details of the ordinance we're proposing for introduction this evening. Mr. Jones.
Thank you very much, City Manager. Good evening, Mayor Kasakian and members of the City Council. As mentioned by the City Manager, we are here today, this evening, to respectfully recommend that the Glendale City Council introduce the Ordinance of Plastic Waste Reduction Regulations. As mentioned, this ordinance is a continuation of the efforts to reduce plastic waste in our city and to expand the use of alternative materials. This ordinance shall address 6 areas, which I shall describe in the following slides. The first area is the prohibition on the use and distribution of certain polystyrene items, which will be commencing in April 2023, where no food or beverage provider shall use, distribute, or sell any polystyrene foodware in conjunction with the sale of prepared food, raw food, or beverages at any location within the city. No person shall or distribute any polystyrene foodware or polystyrene coolers at any location within the city. No vendor in the city shall sell, distribute, or use polystyrene packing materials, including, but not limited to, foam peanuts, foam popcorn, or packing noodles within the city. No person may sell, distribute, or use within the city any meat or fish trays, produce trays, and/or egg cartons made in whole or in part from polystyrene. And finally, city employees, contractors, and agents, and officers acting in their official capacity shall not purchase, use, or distribute polystyrene foodware. Again, this is to commence April 2023. The second area, also commencing in April 2023, is that food and beverage providers shall not use, distribute plastic straws, stirrers, or utensils, whether for use on-site, to go, or delivery. Disposable straws, stirrers, and utensils must be non-plastic, made from non-plastic materials such as wood, pasta, paper, sugar, bamboo. As City Council knows, we've already passed the disposable foodwares accessories on request ordinance, which means that these items have to be requested by the public and they're not given out automatically. So the second part of this ordinance is for a number of items to begin in April 2024. The first of these is to establish disposable foodware standards. Disposable foodware and disposable foodware accessories must be made of materials that are accepted by the city's recycling program and compost collection programs. These items must be free of all added fluorinated chemicals, as certified by the BPI Institute or other independent third-party certifying organization. And to assist organizations in complying with this part of the ordinance, the city shall maintain a list of suppliers that offer disposable foodware and disposable foodware accessories that meet these standards, which the organizations can look into and get the information that they require. Also, commencing in 2024, food and beverage providers shall charge customers 25 cents for every disposable cup provided. Income from the disposable cup charge shall be retained by the food and beverage providers for purposes of funding compliance with the city waste reduction regulations. Food and beverage providers shall be asked to identify the disposable cup charge on any menu, ordering platform, and/or menu board, and shall inform customers placing telephone orders. Also commencing in 2024, we want to establish requirements for the use of reusable foodware for on-premise dining, where prepared food or raw food or beverages served for consumption on the premises of food and beverage providers shall only be served using reusable foodware, except that disposable paper, food wrappers, sleeves and bags, foil wrappers, and napkins and straws, and other items shall be allowed for the dining on premises where they meet the previously described foodware standards. Also commencing in April 2024, we recommend that the prohibition on the use and sale and distribution of provision of single-use plastic beverage bottles. This shall take effect when no city employee, representative, contract agent, or official shall use, sell, or distribute or otherwise provide any single-use plastic beverage bottles while acting on behalf of the city or while acting pursuant to a contract, city, or agreement. So again, this is just for the city of Glendale, not citywide. We understand to effectively implement this ordinance, we need to develop or have developed an exemption process. This exemption process consists of a number of items. First of that is of undue hardship. Undue hardship includes, but is not limited to, where no alternative to using single-use plastics exists, where an alternative to single-use plastics is unavailable at a commercially reasonable price, where compliance with this title is unduly or burdensome to the food or beverage provider, where other regulations include food safety laws conflict with the implementation of these regulations. Also, obviously, this ordinance would not comply to individuals bringing food for consumption. And also there'll be food or organizations that have entered into existing contracts prior to the effective date of the ordinance would be exempt from the ordinance 4 months following the effective date, so they can change their suppliers and change the types of products that they wish to get. So regarding enforcement. This is going to be comprised of 3 areas. The main focus of enforcement is going to be that of doing the education programs. We have proposed in the ordinance that there's a 90-day education program once the ordinance has been adopted. The city manager has the ability to extend that 90-day education program to a 180-day education program. We feel that's very important, and that education program timeframe gives us the opportunity to inform effective organizations about this ordinance and to help them to come and be in compliance with this ordinance. This will be a complaint-driven ordinance. It won't be proactive, so people will come into the city to see where the ordinance has not been applied, and then let the city know where that is occurring. We have established an administrative enforcement process and a fine process for this ordinance where the enforcement takes place. The fines established for this ordinance are the same as those that were established for the disposable foodware ordinance, as mentioned by the city manager. Therefore, staff recommend that the City of Glendale City Council adopt the ordinance for introduction as described herein, and we're available to answer any questions that you may have regarding the report or regarding the ordinance.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Do we have any cards or callers on this item?
We do not.
Okay. Do my colleagues have any questions, comments?
I have a couple questions. We don't have any callers, so maybe I could just, well, let me ask my questions first. We'll see where we go. Could you, Mr. Jones, could you just go through one thing I'm a little confused about, the education program? You mentioned 90 days and you mentioned 180 days. So are you talking about, because I know it's 90 days until the ordinance would go into effect, right? And that 90-day period would be for education, but what's the 180 then?
Councilmember Brockman, thank you for asking that question. So in the ordinance, we understand that in the 90 days, it's going to require a large effort on the part of staff to do the education program. If we feel that the education program's not been effective or organizations are still having questions about the education program, we can extend that education program a further 90 days to be total 180 days. So it gives us more time to make sure that people understand what we're asking in terms of the ordinance, and so that they can eventually comply with the requirements of the ordinance.
And so during that second 90-day period, is the ordinance in effect or is it not in effect?
The ordinance is in effect, but the fines associated with the ordinance would not be in effect at that point. So
I see. I see. Okay, and that's at the discretion of staff to extend that additional 90 days?
It's at the discretion of the city manager.
City manager, okay. All right, and then just the other thing you mentioned about people that have existing contracts. So you're talking about where they've done a bulk purchase, let's say, of styrofoam products. And you're saying it's existing contracts as of the effective date of the ordinance after that 90 days?
So once the effective date of the ordinance is when the ordinance is introduced and then adopted, and 30 days after that, the ordinance becomes initially effective. So then prior, any contracts that they've entered into prior to that effective date, we're not going to ask them to change. So we give them 4 months in which to comply so they can reach out to their suppliers, change the type of goods and stuff that they're purchasing. So I'm not going to say, because you've purchased all these items and you have them in your supply chain, we're not saying you can't use them. You're allowed to wash those out through your program. And you have 4 months in which to start complying with the ordinance, so you purchase the standards that we
Okay, and that 4 months begins
So we're suggesting that begin in 1 year, so April 2024. So 4 months after that.
Okay, or for polystyrene, it would be 4 months after.
Correct.
What?
After the initial adoption, which will be April 2023.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, I'm confused now. You're saying, so was your intent, David, 90 days after the adoption or after the effective date?
So we're talking about two different things. So,
right.
So for in terms of complying with the ordinance, it'll be, the education program will be 90 days after the adoption date. In terms of having to comply with the ordinance, we set a date of April, because it's Earth Day, so that'd be a good day to get people up to speed that they have to comply with the requirements of the ordinance. So the first two items, and then the other items would be in 2024. Because there's 6 items together that the ordinance covers. So polystyrene and straws would take effect April 2023. The other items outlined in the ordinance, the bottles, the dining premises, the cup charge, would all take place April 2024.
So if I'm a business restaurant and I enter into a contract for polystyrene plates, before April of this year, then I'm not held to that April date for, I have another 4 months, is what you're saying, to just
Correct.
use all that up.
Yeah.
Okay. I have comments, but I thought maybe we can go through questions.
I'm gonna see what questions there are. Go ahead, Councilmember Al-Satrian.
I have a set of comments, not necessarily
Okay.
questions. I mean, I'd like for us to discuss it because there's a lot of items on here.
We can go to comments. Is there a card, by the way, for this item? There is one caller. Well, since we've asked some questions from staff, let's go to the callers, and then if there are more questions, or we can go directly into the comments, that'll be fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Our one caller is Craig Codwaldler. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. You're on air. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead. We can hear you.
Thank you. My name is Craig Cadwallader, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Surfrider Foundation South Bay chapter. And I strongly encourage council to move forward with this ordinance. I have to admit I'm very confused about the implementation dates, and I think the earlier the better. And I would like to see the 2024 April date changed to January 1st of 2024. These ordinances, this is actually one of the leading ordinances in the state. I track all state ordinances on plastics, and this is a very strong ordinance. It actually has elements that are very good for business. The upon request elements that are already in ordinance here in the city and for the state save businesses a significant amount of money. And the use of reusable foodware for dine-in facilities has been documented as saving huge amounts for the businesses, especially is evident in the Rethink Disposable case studies that are available online at rethinkdisposable.org. And I use one example of the conservatory in Culver City that switched from disposables for dine-in to reusables, and they are saving over $6,800 per year after paying for the dishwasher, water, electricity, and labor. So it's a net profit gain for the business. It also helps with customer goodwill. Most people like to patronize businesses that are considerate of the environment. It helps reduce taxes by reducing cleanup expenses and helps the city meet its NCDES permit requirements of total maximum daily load and MS4 by removing trash from waste streams. And overall, it is a leadership position I would love to see Glendale take that's going to influence surrounding cities. We are working on near clone ordinances for Burbank, Pasadena, Alhambra, and we are now working, starting this week, on a more comprehensive ordinance for the city of Los Angeles. So I hope you'll go forward with this, and the sooner the better. I would like to see the latest implementation date of January 1st of 2024. And congratulations to good work on this. I think it will set a standard for everybody else to meet. The city of Goleta recently passed a near identical ordinance, and we can't find any examples that are documented of businesses that have been harmed by these ordinances. So I hope we can get rid of the misinformation,
Okay. Thank
view
you.
this as a positive, and go forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Who from my colleagues would like to comment first?
So, Councilmember, Mayor Kasaki and Councilmember Broadbent, I just want to clarify one
Please.
point. I apologize. The prohibition and the use of distribution of polystyrene products would take effect 90 days after the adoption of the ordinance, whenever that is. It's the disposable food, it's the, for, when we talk about the reusable items for dine-in, that's when the exemption would come in for the contract. So prior to the effective date of that portion of the ordinance, they would have 4 months after that to make sure that they can get the appropriate dine-in plates and plastics that are dishwasher available. So it's slightly two different things.
So that's strictly for dine-in?
Correct.
For that
Correct.
component? I
So-
see.
so-
Okay, I'm going to turn to Councilmember Al-Sadrian for your comments, since we
I
heard
actually
from
have-
Councilmember Brotman first last
I
time.
have some questions actually now. Mr. Jones, can you walk me through how you see the education piece playing out?
Councilmember Satrin, yes. So we intend, once the ordinance has been adopted, we intend to undertake a 90-day education program. That will be a fairly comprehensive education program. It will consist of a number of things. It will consist of webinars, so we can talk through the ordinance with those businesses that are interested in learning in detail about how the ordinance would work. It would also consist of us doing a social media campaign regarding the ordinance, providing all the comprehensive information on the city's website with a FAQ section. So those organizations can come in and see about and ask us questions. And also staff will be available if particular organizations have any questions regarding bits of the ordinance that they don't understand, that we'll be able to respond to. So we intend to make it, we don't just want to push information out, we want to be fairly active and interactive with the information that we provide on this ordinance, so that those organizations can be in compliance when the ordinance takes effect.
Okay. And then the 90 days that you've selected and the 180, is that something that's based off of city, like past policies, or is that based on, was there like research that the staff did and reached out to the restaurants and determined that based on their operations, because I don't run a restaurant, I don't know how, I don't know what the inventory looks like, I don't know what the processes are, and so is this date based off of our city policies, or is this based on feedback from our restaurants?
So, Councilmember Sarchin, we did a survey some time ago asking restaurants about, what they thought about single-use plastics, how willing they were to change their operations to move from single-use plastics to alternative materials. Based on the information we got back from that survey, and based on the previous ordinance that we passed regarding disposable foodware accessories, we think that the 90-day education program is enough time for us to get our message across to those organizations and for them to come back to us and ask us specific questions of how they can comply with the ordinance.
Was the survey done in multiple languages?
The
Can you
survey
walk
was
me
done
through?
in English and Spanish, I believe.
Okay. I don't have any more questions, but I have comments.
Okay, just in terms of the outreach, which is a big component of this, without it, the success of it, I think, will be questionable. How are we, what is, you mentioned the different ways we will do outreach, but how are we going to measure the success of that outreach? Like, what is our criteria for the efficacy of our efforts?
Mayor Kasakian, thank you very much for that question. Yes, in previous outreach, especially regarding the disposable foodware accessories program, we didn't get the response rates that we wanted. We sent some mailings out, and we got a lot of those mailings returned. So I think we're going to measure success on how many people actually we reach out to, what the response rates are to our social media campaigns. We can collect all that data through clicks and through, I'm not a favor of how that social media works, but we have people in our organization who are. So we can monitor and track the effectiveness and how deep our messaging goes regarding our outreach efforts.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I'd like to add that as well as all the steps that Mr. Jones enumerated, we'll also be partnering with chambers of commerce, business associations, various other entities that will have membership of these establishments that we can get the message to.
Okay. And I think that's all important. We should do all of that and more. My advice and my what I want to emphasize is that if we need to hire and contract with someone, to do outreach. I know that this is very ambitious to try and do with our staff and interns in sustainability and even within code enforcement, whoever we end up roping into helping us out with this, it may not be enough. We're a large city with many businesses that are going to be impacted by this. We have to leave no stone unturned. So if that means we end up hiring or contracting out with someone, I encourage us to do so. And obviously, with the criteria that's been mentioned, multilingual is important. Figuring out how to get to the right person at a business. Oftentimes if you go and knock on a business, the person that you want to speak to isn't necessarily the person that's there at that moment. So it may require multiple visits and touches before we get in touch with the right person. So those are some of my concerns. Councilmember Brotman, Councilmember Al-Satrian, did you have anything else that you want to add?
I have a whole list of comments, so I don't, but I want to go back and forth with you all,
Okay.
so.
Well, I don't have a lot. I mean, if I could.
Sure, go ahead.
Because we've gone over this a number of times. I support what we're doing, and I like the elements that we have included now, the 6 different components to this. My only concerns are with the penalties that we've set. I think are kind of ridiculously low. And I think it would just be more appropriate to either model what we have in the Glendale Municipal Code, which is $100 for a first offense, $200 for a second, and $500 for a third, and without a cap. Now, I know that the way we operate in practice is we give warnings, and we can say we give a first warning. I know we tend to give more than one warning. I don't know if we've actually ever cited anybody so far for our foodware accessories upon request. I suspect we have not, but we've gone to people with multiple warnings. So given that we are already pretty light-handed when it comes to these kinds of things, I think we should have, more serious penalties on the books, and staff obviously always has the discretion of whether to actually, hit somebody with a monetary citation. So that would be one thing. The other thing is kind of the staggered implementation. I think of all the things that are here, I think the most complicated probably is the reusables for dine-in, because that is going to involve restaurants making changes, either staff to wash things that they're not washing now or to put in dishwashers. So I think that giving a little bit more time for that, to me, makes a lot of sense. Still, I think a January 1st, 2024 date is sufficient. That's a whole year from now. So I would recommend that. The other items like the cup charge, the water bottles, which is, or not water, the beverage bottles, which is just, kind of a City of Glendale thing. The, what's the other one? The foodware accessory standards. I don't see why those have to go out to 2024. And I think it would be a lot less confusing if we could have all of those kind of come together and be implemented at one time. And I'm okay if we say it's more than 90 days, give ourselves a little bit more time, but because I think there's benefit to having it all implemented at one time. It's a lot less confusing. And I'll only make the exception there for the dine-in reusables, which I think does make sense to extend that out. So if we did, maybe instead of 90 days, we did 120 days, but we put everything together, I think that would make more sense to me. So that's what I would propose to my colleagues, and that's really all I have.
Okay. Well, and to this evening, we're looking at only the introduction of this. So if we have differing views on this, we can perhaps, if it's just a matter of implementation date, we can easily craft. I'm sure staff can bring back something where there'll be different options for a full council to consider. Councilmember Al-Satrian?
Okay, so where do I start? So anything I'm going to say has nothing to do with what we do at the city. I actually agree with Councilmember Brotman on bringing up the date for our city services, unless, Mr. Jones, you have an explanation as to why the 2024 date was there. Maybe we have a stock of, I don't know, water bottles sitting somewhere that we need to use. You know, when this item came up, my understanding was that we were going to do a thorough education component before we even started talking about enforcement. And I specifically remember saying that time and again when this item was first brought up. I don't think that 90 to or 180 days is sufficient. I pictured this education piece being not just letters going out or not just social media campaigns, but us thoroughly educating our restaurant owners and our small business owners. They are just coming out of COVID, or we are still in COVID. The last thing that I want to do is impose new things and new barriers for our restaurants and small business owners. I'd like the city to be a partner with our restaurants and small businesses, so I'm seeing this as, if we have a list of vendors that provide that cheaper, eco-friendly utensils and whatever else that we are now getting rid of, I'd want to make sure these things are incorporated into the education and outreach piece. I'd like for the education and outreach to be done all the way through the enforcement. I think it's a continuous process, not just something that's done in 90 days or 180 days. I really don't envision the business owners that have language barriers joining webinars and following social media campaigns in that manner. So let's think about how we partner with different organizations to do maybe even one-on-one outreach to ones that need it. So I would ask my colleagues, number one, for us to extend that 90 to 180 days for the education piece to be continuous until the enforcement kicks in, and add these additional items for the outreach and education. The inventory piece, the question that Councilmember Brotman asked, I want to hear, Mayor, your thoughts on this, because I don't know how much inventory restaurants have, and the last thing that I want to do, or what those contracts look like, right? And so for me to, sit here and come out with an ordinance, not knowing that, hinders me from being supportive of them if they've already bought it in bulk, and then we go in and say you can't use it anymore, even though it's already been purchased. So maybe finding a middle ground on that, based on some data that you may have, would be appreciative. And then when it comes to enforcement, I'm not comfortable with the citizen-driven enforcement system that we have. We specifically talked about this during the last meeting where, the last thing I want is citizens walking into businesses and intimidating, especially those that don't speak the language, don't know the system, and it becomes this thing. And it's going to require additional resources for enforcement. And my understanding was that we didn't have those resources. And so who's going to be enforcing? Where does this complaint go? Which staffer is handling, the the ticketing of our? I want. Is there? I mean, if you have an answer to that, I would appreciate knowing it. If not, then do we have to come up with the resources for this after we pass this?
So the reason we're doing the complaint-driven process is because, as you identified, Councilmember Setrin, we don't have the resources to go out and do proactive enforcement on this. So where a complaint is received by our code enforcement department, they will then prioritize that, and then when accordingly, they'll send out a code enforcement officer to that premises to speak to the organization, to remind them about the ordinance, to give them that warning that they need to be compliant with the ordinance. If we're going to have to move to a much more proactive ordinance program, the Director of Economic or Community Development would have to address those resources that would be needed for us to do that.
Okay. So I would be okay with keeping the enforcement as is. If this item is brought back 3 months prior to the enforcement beginning, and for us to have a report on the outreach. And the response.
Is there, I would be inclined to support something like that as well, if we get a report back to see what the efficacy of our outreach efforts was.
After 3 months.
Yeah.
And what would we do with that?
3 months before.
3 months before the enforcement comes in,
Yeah.
kicks in, I want to see where we're at, because the last thing I want is for us to all of a sudden start ticketing without us knowing did we really do the outreach and education in the way that it needed to be done.
I think a report is
So, yeah, but I just want to understand. So the enforcement would start enforcement, because we are very light-handed, as you know. But it would start after 90 days or potentially 180 days. The city manager can extend it to 180 days. So you're saying after the 90 days, we get a report, or after the 180 days? What are you
So
saying?
enforcement kicks in 2024, correct?
So, Councilmember Setrin, so the ordinance, as mentioned, there's 6 parts to it. So 2 parts, as the way it's currently written, would take effect April 2023. The enforcement would come in potentially 90 days after that. The other parts of the ordinance are intended to come in April 2024. So there's the 2 bits. So if you want to do, we can do no enforcement for like 6 months and do an outreach and education program and bring a report back to the effectiveness of that outreach and education program. If the council wants us to delay any enforcement process, we can do that quite happily.
So the items that would go into effect in 2023.
Are the polystyrene
Right.
prohibition.
So are we going to have enough time to reach out to all these businesses within that 90-day period? Then, 6 months later, it kicks in for enforcement.
So,
I mean-
Mayor Kasaki, Member City Council, Councilmember Sarchian, just because this ordinance goes into effect, let's say, April of 2023, doesn't mean that we are going to start enforcement immediately after, right? So we can put the enforcement on hold pending the success or lack thereof of our outreach efforts. We can extend it. And then, like Mr. Jones mentioned, and I like that idea, after 6 months, up to 6 months, we'll bring back a report to council indicating what kind of outreach we've done. We're not going to be able to reach every single restaurant. That's just not practical. And then council can direct us when to start the enforcement. So we're putting the enforcement on hold. I'm looking at our city attorney to make sure we can do that until such time that council gives us direction that you are satisfied with the level of outreach that we have been able to accomplish, and then start enforcement at a given date.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of council, the council can certainly suspend enforcement. I would just say, though, as we're going into this and considering adopting an ordinance, if the majority of the council ultimately, we have to wait for all of you to be here, ultimately wants sort of this 90-day period to assess before, a report 90 days before we start enforcement, then we should just set that in the ordinance now and just say it's 180 days from now that we intend to start enforcing, but 90 days out, we will bring back the report on outreach. not a recommendation from us necessarily, but I'm just saying it's probably for everybody's sake easier to do it that way, so we all know everybody knows what the rules are going to be, how we're going to treat education versus enforcement.
Okay, and doing it that way, would that allow for us, if there's issues, would that allow for us to stop enforcement or suspend enforcement that's going to kick in at
Council
that
can always
point?
adopt a resolution or motion directing staff to suspend or not commence enforcement of an ordinance until such and such activities take place.
I can do that.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
I just,
Councilmember Brahman?
which is fine, I'm fine with that too. How about, as far as the effective date, though, what I raised, I would like to hear from my colleagues whether either of you or both of you are okay with kind of having everything happen at the same time, which would be, I guess in this case, maybe we can have everything would start 180 days out from when we adopt this, and it would be all those elements except for the dine-in reusables, which I think putting that out to January 1st, 2024 is probably appropriate, because that does involve some redoing of processes, which is complicated.
I'd actually like to bundle everything and do everything January 1st, Councilmember. I don't know if we're going to have enough time for the things that we're talking about for April. And last thing I want is to blindside our businesses.
I mean, if you look at, I think a year is a very long time. If you look at the ordinance that we passed over a year ago now, the foodware accessories, we've been doing our outreach. Some businesses are complying, many are not, and we've gone to them multiple times. And in some cases that I know of, in some landmark businesses that I won't name, it's not education. They know. They just don't want to bother. So they haven't done it. So we need to have some mechanism at some point, to enforce this stuff. And for these larger businesses, I mean, a year, it doesn't take a year, Nevertheless, we have not yet issued a single citation, as far as I know, for the accessories, whatever it is, foodware accessories on demand. So we've been very, very light-handed. I don't think our problem is over-enforcement. Our problem is, it's a combination of the education and kind of just willing to let these things go on and on.
But it's also like how we provide resources, right? And that education piece. And that's why I'm saying it's not just a matter of saying, hey, this is the ordinance that is introduced and is in effect that you have to comply with, but that we're partners with our small businesses and restaurants, and we're providing them, here are all the places that you can get the same item that's eco-friendly at a cheaper price, for example, right? And so, if you're approaching it through that lens, then, on my flight back, I have to say this, I actually have been thinking a lot about you as I was going through the airport and then the flight back. They took away I had my reusable with me. They took away the water. On the plane, every single cup of water that I wanted, I had to get a new one. And I think I drink a lot of water, and they wouldn't even pour it into the one that I had. And I think, you have, I think, not just affected me in that way, where I'm looking at this in a very different light, and I'm wholeheartedly supportive of this. I just want to make sure that we're not, pinning down our small business owners in an enforcement manner instead of education, and then letting these big companies come in and continue to do what they're doing, right? And so I'd like to see an opportunity for us to educate, perhaps bringing that. I would be okay with, all of those deadlines being January 1st, and us launching an education piece. I'm okay with moving the April to.
To me, I think that's too far out. Especially things like polystyrene, where many cities have done polystyrene years ago. We're way behind on that one. The stuff is bad. It's filling our landfills. It's breaking down. It's microplastics. I don't want to wait a year to do that. But we can always say after 6 months, if we feel the education isn't going well, we can suspend enforcement. We're not heavy-handed on enforcement, and we don't need to be. We know that. So we can, at any time, we can say, it's been 6 months, it really feels like people still don't get it. Let's not go out with a hammer, right? That's what I would ask.
Councilmember Brotman, let me just put my 2 cents in, and perhaps we can get some resolution on this and move on to the other items and have this ordinance introduced. I do think that, first of all, I do think it's possible to do these things and find alternatives. I mentioned during the last time we were having a discussion about polystyrene that, I remember as a child, McDonald's having styrofoam containers. Nowadays, you won't find a single McDonald's that has them. All the same foods that we were convinced would not be as, as delicious as McDonald's can be in a carton are now just the same. There's no difference. There's nothing that has really changed, and it has made a tremendous impact and has shown that it is possible. Now, there are smaller businesses that may be affected. I think that there is a point that Councilmember Brotman is making that, and I think this is generally what we try to do in the city. We're trying to get folks to comply versus to be punitive. I've also had discussions with staff and my colleagues that oftentimes we have to be careful how we word it, because we may be light-handed and our goal may be to gain compliance. But, in any given election cycle, the council can change, as this council has, and the next council may use the same rules that we intended to do good by to perhaps do harm or to be more heavy-handed. So I think that there is merit to both of what you're saying in terms of clearly delineating when we do the education. But I think for the sake of what the overarching goal here is, which we have to drive our commercial entities in the city towards a more sustainable, more environmentally friendly practice across all of their business services. I think we need to be very clear when we expect to have this done. And then we can come back with reports to see how the outreach has been conducted, how effective it has been. And by then, I'm sure if it's done effectively, we'll have heard back from some businesses who may say that, we're sitting here making these assumptions. I don't know when many of the, as you mentioned, businesses order or order up their inventories, or what kind of contracts they have with their distributors for these materials. So I think a lot more will be learned, but we should set the rules now as to what our goals are and then move forward with education and feedback on what that education has been. So I think that there can be a compromise here. If you're okay with that, we can move with the in-house dining, which will be January 2024, right? I think we should extend from, 90 days for everything else to perhaps move it to 180 days with a 90-day report back. And then on how the outreach has been, but make it clearly enforceable after 180 days. Because a lot of these things are not things that I think will be hard to achieve by businesses. And then I think that we're going to have to, I believe that we'll have to revisit this a few times with reports back from staff, as well as conversations with our business community. And I welcome my colleagues, both Councilmembers Brotman and Nassatirian, to meet and perhaps represent along with staff and be the face of the council to the chambers of commerce to get the feedback and report back to this body as to how that has been going.
So I would be okay with moving it to January 1st for the
In-house dining.
in-house dining. I'm okay with extending it to 180 days with the understanding that in staff's mind, education is a continuous thing that we do, and it's not just sending letters and doing social media. And then making sure that we have that report before enforcement, 3 months before enforcement kicks in.
Okay. We have 2 cards submitted right under the buzzer, so why not? Council will hear from Mike Mohill and from Nelson Lau. Yes. So, Mr. Mohill, you'll have 3 minutes, and then Mr. Lau, you'll have 3 minutes as well. Go ahead.
Good evening, council members. My name is Mike Mohill. I never followed this issue until tonight. Councilwoman Satrian said, hey, she was at the airport and you had problem with your water, then you end up having to buy another glass or cup or something for your water to take on the plane. If I was a restaurant owner, I would be in arms right now. Do you realize how much they're all hurting right now because of COVID? Prices, have you been out to a restaurant recently? I have, not too often anymore. The cost of going to a restaurant has gone up 25%, if not more. And now you want to put another burden on the owners of these restaurants and dining rooms and so forth. You're going to make it so that only the rich can afford to eat out, not Joe the plumber. Is this your goal, council members? I hope not. We don't need to be a leader in this area. Listen to the restaurant owners. They're the one who put you on office and helped you. They're like, listen, I can tell you how many restaurants have gone out of business. And they thank me when I put their name in when they reopened or something like in my newsletter saying, hey, Central Grill, and now it's going to be called The Grill, is going to be opened with a new owner. You've got to be careful what you're doing here. You're talking about livelihoods of the owners of these restaurants and the people who they employ. I dine, but not so often anymore because it keeps going up and up and up. The missus says, hey, only once a week, Mike, to eat out. We can't afford not only your waistline, but we can't afford it either. So please, council members, think not once, not twice, but 10 times before you try to implement this rule. You should have the restaurant owners come here. See, unfortunately, they don't have a lobby here at City Hall. Only the progressive liberals have a lobby here at City Hall and in Washington and in Sacramento. They're too busy trying to make a living. They don't have time to have a lobby here at City Council. Thank you.
Okay. Folks, I understand that you may be appreciative of some folks of the comments they make. I would ask you to hold your applause because it'll only take time from the next speaker. So be courteous to the people sitting next to you who also wish to speak and who want to have their items heard and go home at a reasonable hour tonight. Mr. Lau, you're next. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I'm kind of sitting here listening to all that. I think it's a marvel thing that you're doing to reduce the plastic waste. But I don't know if you have ever asked the citizens and the restaurant owners, and I got a couple of questions. Okay, now this regulation is that you're trying to impose is only the restaurant dining only? Okay, how about when people want to order takeout, you have to use your hand to hold the food? Just put the food on your hand? Okay, so those are the questions. I know some of you probably have businesses, some of you probably never have a business. You could impose a lot of rules and regulations on the people, but presents a lot of hardship for the people and the business. So I would suggest that you, City Council, have us talk to the people, okay, see what their opinion is. I like to save, I reuse my plastic all the time. Okay, I wash them and you reuse them. But if you are here, I need to go to lunch, I need to get a takeout. What are you supposed to do? Put your hand out and put the food on your hand? Right. So it's a good idea to encourage people to save, but not impose a law on the people. You have to do this or else you'll be punished. Okay, So I would kind of suggest that you're all wise people. That's why you're all sitting here. Be considerate. Look on the other side before you make a rule. Okay? Always there's a middle ground. Okay? Don't just, oh, I have the power. I put the rule here. You shall obey. Otherwise, you'll be punished. So please, listen to the people. You know, get survey out at the people, what the people say. That's what I'm asking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Henry? Jordan Henry? 3 minutes.
Council members, thank you for presenting and allowing us to speak. Councilmember Satrian, I think you made some very good points tonight discussing the interests of small business owners, protecting them against corporate hegemony in the current economy. So I appreciate that very much. Those are the people you need to focus on and prioritize their interests, the small business owners, the individual mom and pops. Second, I know a lot of local governments use reporting as a means of enforcement, citizen reporting. So what you're going to experience here is activists going out to restaurants, and they're going to single them out. They're going to spread this information on social media as to which restaurant is adhering and which one isn't. And they're all going to focus on that one by one by one. And I can imagine that that could be easily coordinated, maybe by even members on the council. I would hope that doesn't happen, because that will create a culture of fear, a culture of lack of community, one where they look at their fellow citizen and they don't trust them. Is this the legacy that you want? I don't think it's effective. I also don't totally disagree with your intentions, Councilmember Brotman, to limit plastic use in restaurants, to limit the amount of plastic that goes in landfills. However, I just want to point out that you're drinking a Diet Coke out of a single-use aluminum can. Even though it could be recycled, only about 5% of those cans will get recycled based on current information that comes out. So I would just like to point that out. Thank you so much.
I might.
No, go ahead. If anyone wants to make any comments, we can now consider moving forward with this.
Yeah,
and I appreciate the comments from the public. Thank you for coming and voicing your opinion.
I'll let it go. No.
Okay. One of you will have to make a motion on this, or actually introduce a version of this that then the full council can consider.
Right. Well, I
So before you make the motion, can I get clarification on this enforcement? Can you walk me through the process, what it would be?
What I heard, I think Councilmember Brotman's going to introduce it, but what I heard so far was that the enforcement would be extended to 180 days with a 90-day report to come to council on the outreach and education efforts. The in-house dining would get extended to would go to January 1, 2024. And that would be the piece of it that would change from what's in the current ordinance. And then the only other thing is I don't think we got any further elaboration on the issue of the amount of the administrative fines, other than what Councilmember Brotman
I would not be okay with a higher fine at this time. So I'm okay with what's in there.
what's in the
What's in
Glendale Municipal Code.
the proposal I'm okay with now. And when I asked about the enforcement, so we can just bring up and suspend the enforcement at any time?
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so I would introduce the ordinance with the effective dates that we discussed, which is basically everything would be effective 180 days after adoption, with the exception of the reusables for what are we calling it? In-person dining.
That's what we're calling it in-house. It's in-person.
In-person dining, which would be January 1st, 2024, with the education outreach piece for 180 days, a report back after 90 days, and the administrative fines being aligned with our standards in the Glendale Municipal Code,
No.
which would be 100, 200, and 500.
No, I said I would be okay with what was presented, not.
Since, I mean, the only thing I would say, since there may be a difference of opinion, Councilmember Brotman can introduce it how he proposes it, and there are different fines in the code, so you can introduce it how you propose it. We can hear from any other council member who might have a different view, and we'll bring it back for adoption in 2 weeks. The council can have that discussion about what you feel is the appropriate amount of fees. And what we would actually do is, I think we're going to propose to pull the actual dollar amounts out of the ordinance and put them into the fee resolution. We'll bring the fee resolution to you as part of that item, and then the council can have that discussion about what you feel is the appropriate amount for those fines.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right, so that has been introduced. Thank you very much, and thank you, everyone. The only thing, look, I understand what some of the concerns are from the public. Also, these kinds of concerns about this gotcha fear culture. The only thing I will disagree with respectfully with those who spoke from the audience is there's already somewhat of a culture of that across the board in a number of issues of neighbors complaining about other neighbors. To say that, the effort to rid our community of these plastics that end up in the streets, in our waterways, in the gutters, on lawns, is I think kind of a bridge too far. There are a number of times when the city council and legislatures take action, I think, for the greater good and health of the community. I'll tell you, smoking is one of those things that, I personally would prefer that people did not smoke, but I also understand people who are addicted to nicotine and who do smoke and who have difficulties kicking the habit, or some people who just enjoy smoking. We as a city have made great strides in trying to make this a smoke-free city. Certainly not perfect. We do not have folks going out and actively enforcing it, but we do have residents who occasionally call and complain about smoking that occurs here or there. And we try to make our best effort to make the city a cleaner, better place without the proliferation of nicotine as it was before. We have far less smoking, I think, publicly now, especially in some of our public areas. Is the city better off for it? I don't think that there's a single person in here who would disagree and say that it's not. We try to do things in the best interest, and it is still, people can still purchase tobacco and use it, right? We're going to try to make this effort. People can bring in plastic products from other cities, neighboring cities. We also made an effort to try and limit the use of Mylar balloons because of the impact it has on our electric infrastructure, providing power to our community. So we take a number of actions to do that, and it doesn't mean that it'll be entirely perfect, but we make our best efforts. So with that, thank you for the introduction. And we'll wait for the full council to be back, and then we'll consider adopting the ordinance or the versions of the ordinance that staff will bring back. What is the next item?
The next item is action item B, Public Works, regarding Dunsmore Park Improvements Project. 1, motion awarding a construction contract to All American Asphalt in the amount of $741,260.50, approving a 15% contingency in the amount of $111,189.08, rejecting all other bids, and authorizing the city manager or his designee to execute the contract.
All right, Mr. Galanian.
Yes, Mayor Kasaki, Mayor City Council, for this project, we received 3 bids. And after a thorough review, staff found that All American Asphalt's bid to be the lowest responsive bid from a responsible bidder, and hence the recommendation to award the contract to All American Asphalt. If you'd like a more detailed report, I'll turn it over to Mr. Imrani.
All right.
No, but I have a question.
Go ahead, Councilmember Brotman.
Yeah, one question I raised in briefing, and maybe you can give me an answer now, is whether this site is one that we're planning on or we're considering for solar canopy. Is it?
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, Councilmember Brotman, yes, it is, and we consulted with GWP about this, and also with parks, the fact that we're ready to move forward, and GWP would need several months, potentially 6 months or longer, to put together an RFP for this location for the solar, plus the park's desire to move forward with this project. It was the consensus of staff to move forward with this project, and then when GWP is ready to move forward with the solar, they would come back and do this at a later time.
Okay, and for my colleagues, I raised this question because I was thinking, if we're going to be putting in a solar canopy and we're going to be, driving, I don't know, poles into the ground and all the rest of it, and we're doing this other work, I don't want us to have to dig something out that we've just put in order to do the solar. I'd like us to save money by doing it all at once. So it isn't going to cost any additional money. Is it going to impact any of the work we're doing now?
It will cost additional money to come back, obviously, and do this, but again, based on the schedule for this project, we are recommending moving forward, and then we don't know the timeline for when GWP is going to be coming back, so at this point, we're recommending to move forward. But it's up to council, obviously, if you want us to.
Yeah, I'm not good with that. I would like us to dovetail these so that we're not wasting money. Since we know we're going to put solar in there, let's do it all together. Let's be smart about our spending. So that's where I would be.
All right. There is one card. Jordan Henry.
Thank you. I wasn't actually planning on speaking, but after Mayor Kasakian, your comments for the last...
Mr. Henry, just for clarification, you submitted a card for 8B. You're going to speak on 8B?
Correct.
Okay.
I just wanted to point out the fact that, if you vote to support this, I'm not personally against putting asphalted concrete flexible pavement in the park. But what I am taking issue with is the inconsistency. You're putting petroleum onto a child's playground. What happens to that petroleum when you put it on there? Is there any runoff from that? Does it get into our waterways? Does this create a public harm, such as smoking in public areas? What happens at the end of the life cycle of that asphalt? Where does that petroleum go in the asphalt? Does it go into a landfill? Where does that petroleum come from? Is it supported by the petroleum industry? You're spending $750,000 on this. It's totally fine. I actually think it's a good idea. However, it's inconsistent with the argument you just made against my comments about plastic. Now, I'm not even arguing that plastic is bad, but what I am saying is that you're being inconsistent. So if you're going to make an argument, please do so consistently. Thank you.
The consistency is the inconsistency, Mr. Henry, and if you come here and attended more council meetings, which we welcome you to do so, you would see that there are decisions that are made that are in the interest of the community, including paving with petroleum-based products all of the streets of the city upon which people are driving. Smoking is not a necessity for people driving on paved roads or walking or bicycling to get from point A to point B but thank you very much, and let's move on. Mr. Henry, we do have rules here, and your council comments were heard and were responded to. So with that, let's have a motion, and I'm happy to continue this afterwards if you'd like to have a discussion offline. Yes?
No, because I said I didn't want to go forward with this at the present time, because I do want these projects to be done in conjunction.
All right. And are you in agreement?
We need 3 votes.
Yes. Well, we don't need 3 votes. We need a majority, but
Majority of the quorum,
I just
majority of the
want to
quorum.
make sure that there's support. I mean, I'm fine with bringing it back, but
Mr. Mayor, Mayor City Council, let's, if it's your desire, if you're not too You're not comfortable making a decision tonight? Let us take a second look at the situation and work with the GWP team and bring this item back at a later date.
All right,
I'd like that.
okay. So my colleagues have spoken. Let's move on to the next item, please.
Okay, our next action item is C Public Works regarding fiscal year 2023 Americans with Disabilities Act ADA curb ramp installation and sidewalk repair program. 1, resolution rejecting all bids, dispensing with competitive bidding, and authorizing the Director of Public Works or his designee to directly negotiate with one or more bidders for the fiscal year 2023 Americans with Disabilities Act curb ramp installation and sidewalk repair program. Specification number 3913.
Okay, Mr. Galani?
Yes, Mayor Kasaki, member of City Council. For this particular project, we received only 2 bids. Both of them were considerably higher than the engineer's estimate. Hence, staff's recommending to reject both bids and authorize Public Works to start negotiations with both bidders. And again, if you'd like additional detail in the presentation, Mr. Amrani can provide that.
All right, let's have a brief information, and then after that, we'll take it into consideration.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, as Mr. Golania mentioned, this is a project that we do on an annual basis in different maintenance districts throughout the city. This year, we're looking at 3 maintenance districts, 4, 5, and 7. It includes a variety of different projects for concrete pavement and repairs. And because of the fact that we received higher than what we expected bids, we think that we can go back and negotiate with the 2 bidders and hopefully bring the price down. Once we've concluded those negotiations, we will bring a staff report back with the recommended award for your consideration.
All right. Any questions, comments, any cards on this?
No cards on this and no callers.
Okay. Who would like to make a motion?
I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Let's have roll call, please.
Council members Asatryan,
Yes.
Brotman,
Yes.
Divine, Najarian, Mayor Kasakian.
Yes. Now let's move on to hearings, 9A. Can you please read that into the record?
Yes, hearing A, Public Works regarding public hearing regarding restructuring and increase of solid waste collection rates. 1, motion to open and continue public hearing to January 31st, 2023. 2, resolution restructuring and increase of solid waste collection rates.
Okay. Mr. Galanian?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Mayor City Council, I'm just going to turn it over to Mr. Amrani to introduce the item and to introduce our presenter, Dan Hardgrove, our Assistant Director of Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Galanian. Mayor Kasakian, members of City Council, this is a project that's been long in the making in terms of the changing our rates for the residential customers. As you'll see in a short presentation that we have, there are several factors that are basically moving us in this direction. One of the main ones is that these rates have not changed since 2010. The costs have gone up in terms of providing service. There's been a lot of regulation changes and requirements by the state of California, CalRecycle specifically, which is the agency in charge of enforcing the rules for trash collection. So we are going to provide you with a short presentation on the background for this issue and be happy to answer any questions afterwards. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Dan Hardgrove, Assistant Director of Public Works, who oversees the Integrated Waste Management Division.
All right, thank you, and we'll mark the hearing as opened at 8:12 p.m. Mr. Hardgrove.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. This evening, we are going to have an open public hearing for the adopting new solid waste residential rates. Okay. I'm having trouble here with the technology, folks, sorry. Okay. So we set out to the objectives of the cost of service analysis. There were several of them. First and foremost, it's particularly challenging because it's been over a great deal of time since we had our last rate adjustment. 2010, over 12 years, is when we last raised our solid waste rates. And over the course of that time, we've also, it has been compounded by a literal paradigm shift in the way we need to do business in the last few years. The COSA set out to, as an enterprise fund, we must accurately change our customers for the service that we provide, or accurately charge our customers for the service we provide. These changes over the past decade have created a profound imbalance between the cost of doing business and the resources that we need to provide the service. This imbalance has resulted in a trend of depletion of our reserve fund resources meant for covering our operations, maintenance, and capital expenditures that needs to be corrected. The COSA seeks to correct the imbalance between the costs and revenues and reestablish a level and reliable reserve for funding our operations into the future. However, based upon all these factors, a rate increase is much needed, but staff sought to pursue a phased multi-year approach that minimized the impact as much as possible to our customers. Some of the factors driving the cost increase, well, first of all, 12 years. This is an extraordinarily long time to go without looking at and adjusting the rates. The CPI, just to give you a sense, over the past 12 years has been over 38.7%, and that's just the base. Independent of other factors identified here, our base level expenditures have increased over 46%. To compound that, and one of the most significant issues driving this increase is that the solid waste industry has undergone a flurry of state regulation changes over the past 12 years, with AB 341 in 2011, AB 1826 in 2014, AB 1594 in 2020. AB 1594, for example, was a law that prohibited. We used to take our green waste to the landfill and use as daily cover, and that was considered diversion. We were actually contributing towards our diversion rate. AB 1594 discontinued that being able to be used as daily cover and get diversion credit for it. So we needed to take the green waste to a different location and have it processed. So it was a very simple change in the law, but had monumental effects on our operations. And of course, the most significant issue that we faced in terms of state laws and regulations is SB 1383 in January of 2022. This represents an absolute sea change for us in the way that we now must operate. SB 1383 requires cities to implement an organics collection program for our residential customers. This means combining food waste and green waste in their green containers. It also affects both the residential and commercial sectors. Of course, we're focused on the residential sector this evening. It ensures that edible food for food service establishments is recovered and made available for distribution to the public. It involves conducting extensive education and outreach, purchasing a certain amount of organic contact products, securing access to organic processing capacity, and conducting extensive monitoring, compliance, and enforcement activities, which required an entirely different additional program for us to implement. All of these measures that we're doing relative to the state mandates, the city is held responsible for. If we fail to comply or get our customers to comply, we are held responsible and would result in a massive amount of fines. In addition, to this, we've seen a massive change in the recycling market over the past 4 years since China implemented its national sword policy. which essentially closed the markets in China to American recyclables. Specifically, the Pacific states were affected by this. This resulted in a paradigm shift where we were once being paid to provide recycling commodities to a processor who would then sell them, to paying for the recyclables to be processed. Of course, the closure of the Shoal landfill has impacts as well on our costs. This is due to take place by the end of 2025. The resultant impacts of the closure on our integrated waste operations include an initial capital outlay of $640,000 for new equipment and a $1.4 million per year at this point operational cost increase for taking our refuse to an alternative destination. These costs represent 5.8% of the total 8% rate increase proposed for the last 3 fiscal years in the COSA to meet the projected revenue requirements in those years. In addition, there's just trends in the industry. Of course, the inflation we've seen in the past couple years has been astronomical. There's a shortage of refuse trucks drivers. The ability to hire and retain drivers and be competitive in the market is very difficult. Supply chain delays in the purchase of trucks and equipment, and increased costs for raw materials such as steel to manufacture containers and trucks. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. So the overall findings of the COSA. This slide shows what happens if we don't adjust the rates, essentially. We have an entirely different level of demand on our operations with the same rates unaltered for over 12 years. Our cash balance, or fund reserve, respective of funding integrated waste programs, is in a nosedive, for lack of a better term, with the complete depletion of available funds anticipated to be exhausted by fall of next year. Our operating expenditures remain mission critical to providing service to our customers, so the only means to pull up the yoke of this trajectory is to increase collection rates. Okay. So an overview of the COSA's findings. These are the key findings. First, current rates for individual collection activities, say servicing a 96-gallon container once per week, or servicing a 2 cubic yard bin twice per week, are now completely inconsistent with the total cost for providing that particular service. The proposed course correction here is to raise each of these individual rates to the accurate cost of providing that service today. So the initial rate adjustment, which is expected to take place in February, is not simply a rate increase, but a rate restructure. So customers are actually paying for exactly the service they're receiving. The second key finding is all of the numbers and percentages that we're presenting here tonight. At the end of the day, Glendale remains quite reasonable when compared to other cities in the region. In fact, we're near the lower third if this was approved as proposed. Finally, the COSA has created a model to distribute the needed increases over multiple years to buffer the impacts to our customers. So let's take a look at some of these key findings a little closer up. This is basically the new rate schedule. But I won't go over this entire chart, but I just wanted to kind of give you an example of what this means as we're looking over it. If we look at, say, the 96-gallon carts, you could see our current rate of $18.34. The second column is the effective rate as of February 1st. The third column is the amount of the adjustment. The fourth is a percentage of the increase. And then the fifth and sixth represents the customer base that would be expected to be impacted by that particular rate. In this case, for 96-gallon carts for single-family residents, that's about 56.1, the largest percentage of the customers, or about 19,000 customers. Since this item was brought to council on September 13th for consideration for the public, the Prop 218 public noticing process, The city did receive a substantial credit from LA Sanitation District for its host fees from Shoal. This revenue was calculated into the COSA's final report, which is presented in tonight, and resulted in a small reduction in the rates before you tonight across the board. So if you see the numbers don't look familiar, they're probably a couple of dollars less for each service area. Okay. And next slide, please. All right. I mentioned that where Glendale sits in relative to the changes we're proposing with similar communities in the region. You can see by this graph, the dark bar at the far left is where we stand now, and the dark bar in the near middle is where we would stand if the rates before you were approved. We're still very much in the lower half of the rate structure. Keep in mind that all of these communities are in the same boat in regards to the unfunded mandates resulting from state regulations. The graph, which was submitted with the final report, is now not up to date. This information still remains a moving target, as there's a lot of adjustment rate activity going on right now among these communities. We know of at least 8 in this group that have changed their rates since this analysis was done and this data gathered back in August of last year. And we also know that some communities are expected to raise their rates as early as July. Pasadena, for one, is going to be raising their rates very soon.
Mr. Hargrove, Councilmember Brotman has a question.
Yeah, so this, the black bar in the middle there, which is what you said would reflects the rates. If we approve this change, this would be after the first year adjustment, right? This isn't the 5-year adjustment.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Brotman, yes, that is the initial rate adjustment. I believe we may have some additional information, some slides that can kind of flesh that out for if you care to see it.
I mean, that makes sense because you're comparing it to other cities that you're not putting in where they're going to be in 5 years. So that makes sense.
Correct.
But so these cities to the left, like Anaheim and Montebello, Alhambra, whatever. I don't know if you know this, but have they all already done their rate adjustments, or are many of those eventually going to leap over us to the right once they go through their adjustment process?
Councilmember Brotman, of course, a lot of that would be speculative in terms of where they actually land with their rates. I can tell you and can actually demonstrate that those at least I know that I'm just looking at this Monterey Park, Montebello, Rosemead have all raised their rates since this was done. They're still kind of in the same position. They moved a little bit further, closer to where we are, but they have adjusted their rates. And some we know also that have similar proposals as we have, where it's a multi-year rollout. Claremont, Glendora, I know, have increased their rates as since this graph the data was compiled, and they also will be raising the rates for the next 3 years, either CPI or a set 3%, I think is what Claremont's doing. So that's just to give you an example of kind of how this thing is moving.
But it's interesting that, so Pasadena, you're saying, is going to increase the rates further, and they're already pretty far up to the right of this chart.
Yes, we understand they have plans to increase the rates in July of this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Now I see Burbank all the way to the right, so they've recently undergone an increase, right?
Yeah, I believe their last rate increase that we're aware of was May of last year.
Okay.
Okay, please continue.
Okay. The third close-up slide on key findings that I wanted to share is essentially the idea of trying to ease the pain for our ratepayers. As you can see, the top column represents how we are proposing that the rates be introduced, rolled out. Just a point of clarification, and we talked about this previously at our in our September discussions, that this model represents a cumulative average of the individual rate corrections. Again, where all the rate, the cost for each of those services, a 64-gallon container once per week, a 2-yard container, a bin twice per week. This is an average of what those rates are in the first year, and then after that, they're all the same. You also may note, council may note that the first initial roll rate is 85%. This is also a result of the credit that we received from the LA Sands being calculated into the coast, so that was formerly a 95% number, and we were able to reduce the rates as a result of that revenue. The bottom graph is our goal. This would stop the fund balance from taking a nosedive and maintain it at an appropriate level. The best management practices for the industry is to maintain a fund balance of about $5 million. The rate adjustment over these 5 years are the lowest possible to train that fund balance and remain solvent. Next slide. Okay, so just a quick look at another numbers table, this is the projected operating results. If the COSA goes into, or if the rates are adjusted, you see the top bar, or the top rows are our revenues, and the bottom is our expenditures. What I really wanted to point out with this is that very bottom total surplus / shortfall. You could still see a lot of parentheses there, meaning that the expenditures outpace our revenues even with these rate changes. But if you go to the next slide, this is the value of the fund balance. You can see again, our goal with the graph, but the bottom line ending cash, you can see that as a result of the rate increases, we are maintaining a cash balance or fund reserve throughout the range of adjustments. And finally, in conclusion, we are before council tonight just to continue the process for this term. Council has opened the public hearing for the rate adjustments. Staff further recommends that at the close of the public hearing, which is to be moved to at least January 31st, 2023, that the recommendations are approved. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Okay. We do have some cards, and we have a caller on the line. I can entertain questions from my colleagues at this moment, or if you would prefer hearing from the members of the public, we can take it in either order. All right, in that case, let's hear from folks who have been patiently waiting to speak. First speaker will be Richard Lee, followed by Jordan Henry. Mr. Lee, you'll have 3 minutes. Is Mr. Lee here? There he is. It's all right. Take your time.
Well, good evening, Mayor Kasakian, members of the council. My name is Richard Lee. I'm a longtime resident of Glendale, 51 years. And I just have a few comments, and I know that others will have fill in the gaps. Obviously, this is a very sobering, drastic increase. It's an increase up to 358% of the current rates, which is almost a quadrupling, and which takes place in the next 4.5 years. And in all my 51 years here in Glendale and years prior, I have never seen an increase on this magnitude. I've never heard of it, never seen it, and I'm sure that this will create a great amount of hardship for a number of Glendalians, especially the elderly. One item I'd like to point out is that the current service that is being provided by the City of Glendale is wonderful, outstanding. I could give just one small example. For one reason or another, one of our bins was overlooked. Our pickup is on a Friday, and so we had a bin that was overlooked, and we needed the bins for the weekend. I called in the next day. Someone came, picked up, and emptied the bin. And so in all of our years here in Glendale, that's the kind of service we've enjoyed. And so we're concerned that outsourcing this service to outsiders, an outside company, would give them free rein to raise the rates even further at will. And also, I look upon this as a method to outsource or export Glendale jobs, which is quite unfortunate. We much prefer to see our waste picked up by workers who are local and who will benefit from the employment with the City of Glendale. And finally, it's my understanding that once this arrangement takes place, that the City of Glendale will dismantle the solid waste department and in essence reduce the fees or the costs of that department down to near zero. However, they will continue to receive the fees that we're currently paying. And so therefore, the balance of the increase in fees will go on to the outside service company. This appears to be an unfortunate arrangement.
Mr. Lee, if you could just wrap it up, please.
Which would lead to inefficiencies and extremely higher costs to our residents.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before
Thank
we move on, could we address it? Because I think that there is no plan to outsource, there is no plan to eliminate solid waste. I don't know where this is coming from, but let's clarify that before we move on.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Brotman, that's absolutely correct. There are no plans to outsource our residential trash collection services to any outside companies. So this rate is designed to make sure that the structure that we have in place with our current employees continuing to take care of the residential solid waste collection continues.
All right. So, Mr. Henry, you will speak next, followed by Alan Dish, and as you're making your way up to the podium, let me remind folks that there will not be a decision being made this evening. We are going to keep the hearing. Hopefully, we will continue the hearing till January 31st when we vote on this with a full council. Mr. Henry, 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. My name is Jordan Henry. I'd like to speak on this. I would also first like to request an extension for the written complaints or the written protest, because 40% of council is not present. Given that we've had months to be available for this, I would request that you would put a motion forward to extend that deadline as well for written protest. Also, when I had the opportunity to run for city council, I spoke to a lot of city employees, several of which confirmed that they knew that SB 1383 or something similar was coming down the line years ago. There was no political will on council to address the lack of facilities in Glendale to deal with organics or recycling. We knew that China would no longer purchase our recycling years ago. This was not dealt with in a timely fashion when the economy was more solid, similar to what happened at GWP with Grayson Power Plant. Another issue, this increase, the gentleman previous to me said it was 358%. If you have, according to this pamphlet, but these numbers have changed, if you for the 64-gallon cart, that's a change of 492%. That is fivefold. That is 13 times, 1,300% more than the current rate of inflation. So that's very substantial. The operating cost for trash collection, solid waste trash collection, has no doubt drastically increased due to the CalPERS mismanagement and the amount of money that will be spent on that, which has not been addressed by council, and our debt is perpetuated. And in terms of Shoal Canyon, to pay for the cost of Shoal Canyon, or the amount of money that's going to go to take down Shoal Canyon, the methane that could have come from Shoal Canyon, and that we've spent millions of dollars on a pipe to direct it to Grayson, that could have been revenue that would have reduced these costs. So what we have here is a systemic failure of council to address issues as they arise, or as they arose over time. And here we are having an increased rate. And there are people, elderly people, who are on fixed incomes who will suffer from this. Poor people who will suffer. Immigrants, people who do not speak English will suffer directly from the mismanagement, years of mismanagement of council. So please understand that you may be fixing a problem, but you're causing many, many more problems by doing this. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Jordan Henry. Please extend the deadline for the written protest. Thank you.
And after Alan Dish, the next speaker will be Ann Siegel.
Good evening, Council. How are you? I'm doing well myself. I'm here to ask you, please, rather demand that you do not increase the rates. And I'm asking this because how much have wages increased during the past, let's say, 13 years? Was it a 300, 400% increase? I don't think so. My question is, rather not question, but again, the second point was about state regulations, and we're sending a lot of money to Ukraine right now, and we should be sending, my God, we should support them, but we can also ask for subsidies from the state to offload these costs, I feel like. The previous speaker spoke about Shoal Canyon, which is another contentious item. And it's very interesting that Shoal Canyon, although it's being closed apparently, but again, you're offsetting these costs by putting it onto the people who simply want to throw their trash. And then trends and so on. I'm sorry, but and I mean this very respectfully, absolutely. I remember a Glendale that didn't follow trends, but instead was a trendsetter. I want us to set a trend of stopping this. So again, I'm asking you to stop it. That's enough. Do not go forward with this company. Vote no on increasing the prices. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Do not offload extra costs and burden the working class. Instead, you should be charging institutions, wonderful institutions, but nonetheless institutions like the Americana, mentioned by Mike Mohill, or even the Galleria. Who knows how much waste they produce? Are they experiencing any increases? How come 18,000 residents will be experiencing first 85, then it was 73, then it was, I don't know, 500%. I don't want any more increases. Do I still have time?
You have time until, yes. You still have time.
Well, I honestly, I don't understand the reason. You know, it's quite a controversial issue, and I'm glad people did show up, even though it's still New Year's. I'm Armenian. We celebrate for 3 weeks. Okay, we did produce trash. That's true. Although we all are in a consumer society, and my point is just this, that we need to think about this a little more. I'm glad we're delaying it and so on. I'm glad that everyone is not here on council, because believe me, we will be back. I don't know with how many members, but we'll be back. And again, and again, and again. Thank you.
Thank you. And Siegel. And Siegel, followed by Mr. Mike Mohill.
My name is Ann Siegel. I'm a 50-year resident of the city of Glendale. I've been a homeowner since 1976, and I am here to discuss the proposed rate increase. My property is located at 517 Spencer Street in Glendale. I'm the registered owner. I have included the ID, my parcel number, on my letter that I submitted. The proposed rate increase is not reasonable and considered outrageous. The proposal will impose undue stress and anxiety to a majority of Glendale homeowners, residents, period. I was a California real estate broker for 41 years, right here in Glendale. I also am a certified California residential appraiser for 21 years. These proposed increases will adversely affect the overall values of real estate assets held by owners of properties in the city. Please reconsider the impact of the rate increases. The rate increases will also have a serious negative impact on tenants in the city. And also the fact that they have not been raised in 12 years tells me it reeks of mismanagement. It should have been raised every year by a small percentage, and then you wouldn't have people outraged by what you're submitting now. I think it's mismanagement. I will tell you that I never fill up my big 96-gallon bin. In October, I called and said, I'd like to reduce it to the 64-gallon bin. And I was told, sorry, we ran out of them. There's mismanagement right there. He said to me, I said, when can I get one? Well, call back in March and we'll see if they're here. What's going on with the people that are managing that program? That's what I wonder. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Mohill, you're next, followed by Derek Chevalier.
Good evening, Mayor Kosaki and council members. Name is Mike Mohill. Here we go again. The cost of living in Glendale has just gone up again, and again, and again, and again. Why? Like some people before me spoke, because of mismanagement. My question is, the first one is, why is this item 9A not the first item on the agenda to be discussed tonight? Not at, what time is it, folks? 10 o'clock probably? No, not that. Almost 9, okay. Bedtime for some people, okay? The point is, it should have been discussed right after, what? Consent items, but not at this time of night. And you know that. And why did we do it this time, Mr. Kosaki and the city manager? Because you didn't want anybody to show up. Because there are people right now who I've discussed who said, Mr. Mohill, I gotta go to bed, I gotta go to work tomorrow. And yet, you have the nerve to say, well, we're gonna extend it another 2 weeks from now. Is this fair? Do you really care about the people who put you in office? Doesn't look good to me. And I don't want to repeat myself, because I'm so happy to see the young people coming up here complaining. It's only because Mohill's always complaining. It's nice to see some people in their 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s. They're all younger than I am. Thank you for showing up, folks. I really appreciate that. I hate to be the Lone Ranger every Tuesday night. But we need to get involved, keep our council people accountable for their actions. They know what they are doing. Mayor Kasakian, when you and the city manager decided to make this at this time of night, tell me you didn't have a choice, Mr. Mayor. You know you did. And you knew we were going to have a good turnout tonight. All of those other items, the plastic spoons, this and this, that's insignificant. The big point is this rate increase. The cost of living in Glendale is going to go up again. And you're going to be forcing, did you know the state of California for 3 years in a row have had more people leaving the state than coming in? It's easier to get a U-Haul coming in than going out, because so many people are leaving the state of California and Glendale. I hate to tell you, I got one of my subscribers to my newsletter said, Mr. Mohill, sorry I'm not going to be there tonight, meaning tonight. I already left Glendale. I can't afford living in Glendale. I moved out of state. Is this our record? Chasing people out of state? They're doing that at Sacramento. Now you're going to want to do it in the local level at the city of Glendale. Again, I'm thankful to see all the young people speak up tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Derek Chevalier, followed by Karen Betzold. If I mispronounce your name, please correct me.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. But I'm sorry to be here for this reason. I echo much of what's been said. I disagree with Mr. Mohill on those last point. He was talking about issue 8A. I was flabbergasted, that nobody from the council asked one question. What is the fiscal impact of that ordinance on the average citizen? Second, I was flabbergasted how if we're going to have such a drastic reduction in plastic and great. Nobody talked about, then let's remove the gray bins. We're not going to need them anymore, are you? So when you did your calculations, did you calculate how much less refuse is going to be collected as a result of 8A, and then find a way to reduce what you're asking for in 9A? Didn't hear one word about that, which is pretty pathetic, since, of course, the idea that we haven't done anything since 2010 is in itself an admission of either complacency or fiscal mismanagement or absolute incompetence. And then to kick the can down the road, and while staff was talking about the idea and using the other cities, they didn't mention whether or not the other cities they mentioned also dumped a 400% increase on their cities all at once. And again, while the other cities were increasing their rates, kind of incompetent that our staff sat around and go, gee, they're raising their rates. We're not going to do that. We'll just wait 13 years after a pandemic, after we have 7% inflation, after people's interest rates are going up, after we are in a fiscal situation we haven't been on in any of the lifetimes of anybody here. And I don't hear the concern. I see you kind of laughing a little bit about the idea. There will be people that will not eat. There will be senior citizens who will be cold. So, last thing, I would spend my last time saying this. I would love to know how much time each of you spent and the staff coming up with alternatives. Why didn't the city presenting the idea of allowing us to opt out? Maybe we only put our trash out once a month. Why? You just said it, because we want to keep the same staff, keep them employed, because that's the city manager and the city. Let's keep them employed. Let's don't protect the citizens and reduce. Let's make sure we keep them employed. So where is your focus? And where are the other alternatives? We do it twice a week, once a month. You let people opt out. And if there are obstacles to doing this on a fiscal so that people that can afford it more, pay more, if there are obstacles to doing that, what are they? And let's focus on that. Instead, it's just like and this is called a rope-a-dope. Come up with 500%, then reduce it by 200% and go, aren't we heroes? Yeah, you rope the dopes, the citizens that voted and that employ you. Not good.
All right. Karen Betzold, followed by Ramella and Agi, and last speaker will be Nelson Lau, and then we have a few callers. Go ahead.
Your Honorable Mayor and council members, thank you for your service. I have to be honest, I'm exhausted. I've been up for quite a few hours. so this is pretty late for me. It's very difficult as a citizen to come to these meetings. It's even more difficult to rally the troops to come to these meetings. I have a notice here. It says if written protests are filed by majority of the affected property owners, the proposed solid waste rate increase will not be imposed. How truthful is that statement? Because if that's a true statement, then I'm pretty sure I could get everybody on my street to sign that letter. I went up and down my street today. Everybody that answered the door signed it. The people that didn't answer the door were at work. The people that did answer the door didn't know about it. What it was, the outreach for this, I understand I got this really awesome pamphlet, but I've started to be a little bit more proactive about what's happening to my life and how I'm being affected. And I'm letting my neighbors and the other residents in Glendale know about what's happening. They don't have the time to pay attention to this stuff. Is there a way that we can do an outreach? Social media, Glendale, .com really isn't trending. But there has to be a way to get this message out to these people so that they can actually put their work, their vote in. I got 23 signatures today in 2.5 hours. There's 200,000 residents. How many of those pay for disposal? I just think we can do better, because if that statement's true, I'm pretty sure nobody really wants an increase in their rate. Is it true? Second of all, if California regulations cause rate hikes, current trends, which California regulations and agendas cause rate hikes, recyclables and processing is part of California's agenda. If all these things are California's agenda, let's get California to help us out with this. Okay, California is helping us out with the bike path, but we don't really want $6 million. Maybe we can spend $6 million figuring out how to fix this horrible thing called trash that COVID exploded. We got rid of all the plastic bags. COVID came back. Now we have plastic bags, plastic bottles, plastic containers. I've never seen so much plastic in my life. I agree, we need to get rid of it. Let's let California help us out with all of these agendas. Also, please, extend the deadline. If it really has to be a letter, very difficult for families with kids to sign a document. I literally had to beg them to pay attention. Thank you.
Carmella, followed by Nelson Lau.
Good evening, gentlemen and ladies. Ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so here we go again, talking trash. So, as a matter of fact, here we have a common interest with renters, with owners, landlords, apartment buildings. We have a common interest, raising cost of the operating an apartment building, and yeah, so that's going to transfer the cost to us, the renters. So, well, just saying, another hike in our never mind. So, well, this put aside, I just want to say that it's another failure of this municipality, and another indication of failing capitalism. So just watch that video that I sent you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Next is Nelson Law.
Yeah, I'm just speaking from experience, okay? I agree with all these people spoke before me on the rate increase. Okay, now earlier mentioned that you won't outsource to another company to pick up the trash. Okay, but I had the experience because I own a 6-unit apartment, and all of a sudden last year my rate went up almost 400% in 1 year. Okay, that's kind of outrageous, you know. And then, like the previous speaker said, there are a lot of senior people. Okay, they have a limited income, and all of a sudden the inflation is not that high. Okay, and all of a sudden you have a 400% increase for waste collection. You know, I believe there should be a certain increase because of everything else, but you have to kind of follow the inflation rate, not just, oh, I'm going to triple, quadruple your rate, you know, all of a sudden, and this is what happened to me. Okay, so I think it's unfair to all of a sudden increase to the people 400% increase, like myself. I got that experience. I used to, my rate used to be $72, and all of a sudden to $270. So I wish you know, sitting there as, you know, I know you guys are very smart, okay, managing the city. So, but please be considerate to the people, okay? Because just like earlier said, okay, have the restaurant charge 25 cents per cup. Restaurant would be glad to charge 25%. 25 cents for the cup. But who ended up paying for it? The residents who want to buy a cup of coffee. Unless you open your mouth and then they pour it into your mouth, then it will not be 25 cents. So please consider what people think. Okay? Thank you.
Okay. We have 2 callers. 3 callers. Let's go to the callers, 3 minutes each.
Our first caller is Devron Shudik, and I apologize if I mispronounced your name. Please correct me. You are on air. You have 3 minutes.
Oh, you did a great job. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Kasakian and the council. I just want to say I'm completely supportive of your measures to comply with state measures. But as a 30-year Glendale resident, I just have to tell you that these rates are a little bit too much in too little time. For example, you're saying that it hasn't been raised since 2010. Had they raised rates just $6 per month since 2010, they would be getting more in 2022 than they are asking for in 2023. Let's be real here. That's $72 more, and if you are getting a 64-gallon cart, that's $71.79 raise between January and February. So it's just, I'm totally behind this. I'm totally behind, you know me, I'm totally behind the environment. I want us to be a green city. I just don't want to do it overnight. And as somebody who actually lives here, I actually can't afford that. So, and yeah, I'm an older person. I just can't afford that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next caller.
Our next caller is Shamaine Bobo. You are on air. You have 3 minutes.
Hi. Good evening, Council. I want to thank you for taking my call, and I'll try to be very brief. There's a couple of things that I just want to point out. I've lived here for over 30 years. I'm really happy to be here. And Glendale was, like, to me, the ideal middle-class area. Just wonderful. Wonderful place to raise children. I now have a bimodal family, however. I'm a senior, and I still have school-age children. But our food costs have gone up 20 to 30 to 40%. Our gasoline costs, depending on which week you are, have gone up 20 to 100%. Our medical costs, my medical premiums alone for the next year are going up 38%. And there's no justification for it. I've already called the place. The education costs for the children are going up. Books, fees, clothes, everything has gone up. It's breaking us. My Social Security payment has not gone up. Well, I stand corrected. It's gone up a couple of percentage points, but it nowhere hit the double digits. Nowhere hit the double. Where am I supposed to come up with this? I'm on a fixed income now, and it's going to take a couple more years for my kids to get out and become wage earners. And it's not just me. I mean, there's lots of people on my block that are elderly, that are on fixed income. This is extremely painful. And I'm not going to begrudge anybody for not doing this stuff a year ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago. That's water under the bridge. I want some progressive way. I'm even willing to accept the fact that you have to increase rates. But there's going to have to be a better way to do it. One, you should ameliorate some of these problems that you say have caused the issues. I'm with the other people. They've alluded to this just tangentially. But, I mean, if you're going to say less trash so we don't have to pick it up as much, fine. Fewer trash collection days, fine. You want to go from 90 to 60? Fine. But then go ahead and let them do it. But I think what you're doing is you're saying, yeah, look, we really want to do that. We want you to go down to 60 gallons and go ahead and put that much little trash out. But you don't want people to do it because you're going to lose the revenue. And I understand that, but there are other ways to ameliorate all of these SB propositions. There has to be a better way. It looks to me like what you've done is you've taken the same box and you want all of those new regulations to fit in that box. No, think out of the box. How can we go around this and still get quality service, which we have, and it's wonderful, and still preserve the integrity of our city and our quality of life, and still have seniors here?
Your time is up. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Bye-bye.
Our next caller is Jennifer Pinkerton. Jennifer, you're on air. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm not calling to comment on the rate increase per se. I do agree with one of the speakers that I think regular, modest rate increases would be a preferred method, but I'm calling primarily to object to some comments that were made by other speakers that I think made that they don't understand how complex the issue of waste management is. Some speakers chastise the city for not being ready or prepared to respond to different regulations, but the fact is that after state legislation is adopted, it can take years for the actual regulations to be fleshed out and for jurisdictions to learn the things they actually have to do. For example, for SB 1383 organics diversion, it was years before cities knew that how often they'd have to do contamination sampling, the color bins they might have to use, the type of outreach mandates they'd have to comply with, and then the food rescue mandates. So it's not as though this was something that was sitting there and that was ignored by the city for many years. One speaker seemed to be a little cavalier as far as saying, well, just put up more facilities for processing, but the fact is it can take 10 to 15 years to permit any kind of municipal solid waste facility, particularly compost facilities that can have problems with odors. And it's not just Glendale that's in this position. This is a statewide issue. The state itself estimates that there's a deficit of 200 composting facilities statewide. So I agree that the state should be doing more to support development of the infrastructure. So I just want to say this is a very complex issue, and I appreciate the city taking this on, and kudos to you for all your work involved. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And that is the last caller? Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for your sharing your thoughts and opinions. The only thing I want to say was in terms of the timing of this item, it is a reasonable time considering how the city conducts our meetings. It was done in the order under hearings as it usually is. And quite honestly, I envy the people who are able to go to bed at 8:30 or 8:45. I wish I could be among them. But I think that we're moving along at a fairly reasonable pace here with this item. As I had mentioned that this hearing will continue until January 31st. And the only question, I think a few folks mentioned about the period to file protest or protest communications. What is the process that governs that? And can we get some clarification for the residents and speakers who address that? And then, of course, if my colleagues would like to comment on any of the things they heard or thoughts that they may have on this item.
Mr. Mayor, since the hearing is being continued until January 31st, any owner wishing to file a protest can do so until the close of that public hearing on January 31st. If you're so inclined, you can make that part of the motion, continuing it to the 31st, just so the record's clear. But yeah, it would be continued to the close of the public hearing on January 31st.
I think that'll be appropriate to do. What are some of the other issues? Council members Brotman and Asatryan, if you have comments or things that you'd like to say.
I do have a question.
Before, and then I have one more question, which is it possible for us to know what percentage or how many seniors would be impacted by these rate hikes? Do we have that information? In the absence of that, I would suggest that we look into, and I know other jurisdictions do this, to provide a senior discount for households that have 65 and above residents who may, I understand that, look, I will say this, some of the comments here I think were accurate. I don't want to label it as mismanagement or neglect, but this decision was deferred. We'll say that out of respect for previous councils, even ones that I've disagreed with. Okay, this decision or decisions oftentimes are deferred by previous councils, but to say that, you know, the way to address mismanagement and neglect over many years or decades is to continue to kick the can down the road, I don't think is a viable solution. No one is relishing the prospect of and I don't think anywhere in this country or in any country is the raising of fees welcomed with open arms by the public saying, please, please increase these fees. I'll tell you, personally, this is a very, very controversial decision that I'm forced to make in my household. I had to get an earful from both my parents over the holidays about this very specific item. I understand it's not something that is going to come easy, but again, as was accurately mentioned, you know, this was something that had not been done for a while. Other councils could have addressed it, did not. So we are here faced with this unsavory decision that we have to make for the benefit of our city. So we shall see where we go from there. But I would like us to look into possible senior discounts or something that would help seniors on fixed incomes. Council members Asatryan and Councilmember Asatryan and then Councilmember Brotman.
I'd actually like to see if we can extend that to low-income families as well.
Sure. Absolutely.
Maybe coming up with like some subsidy program. For staff, have you looked at smaller bins and the reducing the number of days if people don't actually produce the trash? And the number of bins they do take on, for them to basically take those smaller bins, reduce their days, to reduce their fees.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, Councilmember Asatryan, similar to what happened with the commercial franchising, in this case, our goal is obviously to also reduce trash. So we would work with any household that would like to reduce the size of their carts, for example, from 96 to 64, or if they have 1-yard bins, you know, go down to another size. So we are very open to that in working with individual residents in addressing those needs.
Okay, can we, I think Councilmember Devine, if I remember correctly, also brought up just like the overall size, having a smaller size of a bin than the 96 and the 64 that we have because of the amount of trash that, let's say, a single person would be much less than, for example, a family, even though they're living in a home. So I think as we're developing that subsidy program for us to look at an opportunity for people to reduce the number of days their trash is picked up, as well as providing smaller bins.
Okay. Councilmember, Mr. Garcia, did you want to comment on that before?
Sure, if I
Councilmember Roman?
just briefly, Mr. Mayor, members of council, something we'll have to look into a little bit further on the discount for whether senior or low income. There is, under Proposition 218, what's called a proportionality requirement.
Yeah, I know.
Meaning that the burden paid by each property owner has to be across the board the same. The rates don't have to be the same, but the sort of the burden does. So if you're charging one class of ratepayers less, the other ratepayers are by virtue of that paying more. And so we would have that sort of subsidy would have to come from another source of funds. So that would be part of it when we come back.
Okay.
We can do straight discount without making up the difference with another source of revenue.
Sure.
Okay, so, and I guess we're going to continue this discussion in 2 weeks, so.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, well, a few things just from some of the comments, but, I'll say to everybody, none of us wants to raise rates ever, right? It's not a pleasant thing to have to do. But I guess what I keep coming back to is, I don't know what the alternative is. If the refuse fund runs into the black, which it will, we can't stop collecting trash. So what that means is we're going to have to pay it, we're going to have to subsidize it out of the general fund. Isn't that right, Mr. Galanian? To me, there's a real unfairness there, because if we're paying it out of the general fund, all residents in the city are paying, right? But remember that 2/3 of our residents at this point, something like that, have already seen their rates go up because they live in multifamily buildings. So most renters, most condo owners have already seen their rates go up, and so have businesses. So if we were to somehow subsidize single-family homes, that would come at the expense of renters and condo owners. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's not fair. So there's really no alternative. And the reason is the fact that these costs have gone up. The recycling markets collapsed a few years ago, and we recently went through this change where we were getting paid millions of dollars a year for the recycled materials that we were delivering to the recycling center. Now we're paying millions of dollars a year just for the pleasure of being able to get them off our hands. I mean, that's real. That's real money. We could wish it away, but it's there. The state mandates, yeah, I agree with whoever said, let's get the state to pay for it. I wish, but we get unfunded mandates all the time. And they just throw them on us, and it's up to us to do them, right? I mean, we can push back, we can try, but in the meantime, it's on us. We have to do these things by law, and nobody's coming to pay us to do it or to cover our costs. That's real. The Shoal Canyon landfill, that was our decision to close it. And when we did make that decision, we were very explicit that there is going to be a cost to making that decision. We chose to do that because it's an old landfill and there's a lot of history there. But at this point, there are things we can control and there are things we can't control. And there's a lot here that we can't control. And I would say probably, the major failing, which has been mentioned, is that we let this go for so long. So people are being hit with this one-time increase. In fact, after these changes, all of our rates are still actually very competitive compared to other countries. You saw other cities, you saw that chart, right? So we're getting a lot of bang for our buck, even after the change. So it's not really the level of rates. I think it's just the abruptness of the change. And I get it. I'm going to pay this too. I get that. And one thing I would like to do in the motion when we finally wrap this up is make sure that we don't ever let this happen again, that we, 4 years from now, a year before, less than 4 years, a year before this 5-year term ends, we need to do another COSA. And we need to continue to do incremental increases, if necessary, but, you know, incremental increases, and not do these one-time hits. This is, I don't know how this happened or why this happened, but all of us sitting here are just kind of the victims of it. So let's never let this happen again. But really, folks, I don't see an alternative. Nothing that makes sense to me. So that's where we are. And the last thing I did want to mention, because somebody said, you know, is the Americana and the Gallery, are their rates have already gone up. And in fact, unlike what we're doing here, where we're phasing it in, their rates went up, bang, day one. I think the gentleman here mentioned he's got a multifamily property. Those rates went up 3 to 5 times. And it happened just like that, not phased in. So yes, the Americana and the Galleria are paying a lot more, as are multifamily properties who, in many cases, have renters. It's hitting the renters. I think, Romella, you mentioned renters. They're not getting hit by this change. They've already gotten hit, for the most part, unless you're renting a single-family house. So I just kind of wanted to express some of my thoughts around it. And, you know, we don't like where we are, but I think we don't have much choice.
Okay. All right, so we need a motion to continue this, and part of that motion to January 1st, to date certain January 31st, along with the continuation of the period of protest. So who would like to make that motion?
I'll move for the continuance to January 31st and the extension of the protest period to the same date.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, so let's have a roll call for keeping the public hearing open until then.
Council members Asatryan,
Yes.
Brotman,
Yes.
Divine, Najarian, Mayor Kasakian.
Yes, thank you. One thing I didn't want to comment on this. We'll wrap up. We're going to go to, how many oral communications cards do we have? We have one oral communications card. We'll take a brief recess. Do you want to? A moment of personal privilege. And while we recess for 5 minutes, I will just say that to the person who said that, you can go ahead. We'll be recessed. Yeah, we'll go to recess. Thank you.
Mayor Kasakian, do we have
And we're going to recess because we've just lost quorum. We need at least 3 members. Okay, we are back and we have quorum again. So the next item is oral communications.
Yes, oral communications, discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Council may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The city manager may refer the matter to the appropriate department for investigation and report.
Derek Roberson, you'll have 5 minutes.
Glendale has done an amazing job with the programs offered to help the homeless. However, I'm interested in the employment opportunities for the homeless. I've been lucky enough to have the opportunity to obtain an EHV, but throughout the process, I've been more concerned with the employment because I'm 23 years old, and without sustainable employment, I'll never be able to maintain a living. I like to take part of the resources provided by the city of Glendale, but I would also like to contribute to the city. So really my question to the city is, with all the efforts made to decrease homelessness, what efforts have been made and are being made to employ the homeless? Because I would certainly trade a year of housing for a year of employment in a heartbeat. Because I promise it is easier to obtain an EHV than it is to find employment in the city of Glendale or even have the opportunity to obtain an interview with the possibility of hire.
Well, thank you, Mr. Roberson, for coming, and if you've concluded your remarks, I can try and put you in touch with the staff that can help you with that. We do have a Verdugo Job Center that will help you. If the question was for yourself or for whoever it may be for, we are happy to assist you in that endeavor to find gainful employment. We do have programs specifically for that, and we work with employers who are looking to hire people. Of course, everything matters on a case-by-case basis as circumstances, but I'm sure we'll be able to help you. If you don't leave and you stick around after the conclusion of the council meeting, I'll come to you and we'll get you some information of somewhere you can contact and a specific name and phone number that you can call, as well as I'll help provide my phone number in case you're unable to get a hold of someone, so we make sure that we connect you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and waiting through a long evening to address us on this issue. I appreciate it.
Yes, have a good night.
Any other speakers?
No other speakers.
Okay. We're still right before 9:30. Is there any new business?
There is new business.
Yeah, there is. Sorry. All right. Councilmember
I
Brotman?
have one, and I think Councilmember Asatrian has one. So I move that pursuant to the city charter, the council hereby approves the city attorney's appointment of Ann M. Maurer as Chief Assistant City Attorney for Liability and Risk Management, and further that a written copy of this motion shall be transcribed, certified, and delivered by the city clerk to the office of the Civil Service Commission of the City of Glendale as the written statement required by Article 24, Section 5, subsection 2 of the charter.
All right. Is there a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Okay. May we have roll call, please?
Council members Asatryan,
Yes.
Brotman,
Yes.
Divine, Najarian, Mayor Kasakian.
Yes. Thank you. Next new business item?
I move that the city attorney is authorized to resolve the lawsuit entitled Smith versus City of Glendale, case number 20-STCV-20181, in the amount of $35,000 in exchange for a full settlement and release of all claims. The settlement is not an admission of any liability whatsoever, any wrongdoing with respect to plaintiff by defendant or by any person or department, but is the compromise of a disputed claim.
Second.
All right. May we have roll call, please?
Council members Asatryan,
Yes.
Brotman,
Yes.
Divine, Najarian, Mayor Kasakian.
Yes. All right. If there's no other items before this council, I'd entertain a motion and a second to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is
I'll
there-
second.
Thank you. We stand adjourned at 9:29 p.m. Good night and good luck.